Chapter 946. The guild leader's orders weren't slow. There were more than 20,000 people, and it didn't take long for the noise to stop. At least, it was quiet within the guild leader's hearing range. The 26 guild leaders raised their heads to listen to what that guy was going to say, and in the end, they all burst into tears. What did that guy say before? They didn't hear it, but that person actually didn't wait for them to quiet down before repeating himself. At this time, he was already talking to the next chapter, completely ignoring that they were talking to themselves. This was too irresponsible. At this time, when everyone heard the second chapter, they were all stunned. He was actually scolding them by name. Fei Chao. You bastard, you almost shot me to death. Why are you still hiding? Do you think that I can't see you if you hide in the crowd? Look at that stupid hat of yours, it's the ugliest among the 20,000 people. You're still picking it up? Why are you picking it up? Your hairstyle is even uglier than your hat. The 25 guild leaders were at a loss. One of them, however, had a surprised look on his face. He turned around to look at the archer camp behind him. A player's face was green, and he was being watched by a bunch of people around him. At this moment, he was holding his hat in his hand, and his hair was messy like weeds. It was indeed an ugly sight. What's going on? The guild leaders were at a loss. The contempt from the clock tower didn't stop. The archer couldn't take it anymore and suddenly jumped out, pointing at the window and started to retaliate. Fuck you, damn drunkard, rotten drunkard, broken drunkard, you drank so much so early in the morning? You're cursing in front of more than 20,000 people, do you have any manners? If you have the guts, stand there and don't move, I'll shoot an arrow at you and nail you to the wall. Fuck, why did you come out? Why did you come out? To let more than 20,000 people admire your disgusting hairstyle? Sorry, brothers below, please move aside, I'm going to vomit. There was no one below the window, but hearing this guy's yelling, the guild leaders standing a few meters away couldn't help but have the urge to retreat. Everyone looked at the archer who was scolded, and his guild leader had to introduce him to the other 25 guild leaders. Fei Chao, our guild's #1 archer. Then this is... Sorry, I know him, old friend. The embarrassed Fei Chao had to explain to the guild leaders. All the guild leaders were stunned. They were not surprised by this answer, but this answer made them suddenly realize a problem. Before he could think further, Fei Chao had already waved at the archers behind him with a flushed face. Brothers, follow me. Let's shoot down this bastard and rid the world of a scourge. The archers were still in a daze, and the president had repeatedly emphasized that they were not allowed to attack without their orders, so not many people responded to Flying Eagle's shout. However, he didn't bother about it. He turned around and knocked an arrow. However, the guy at the window seemed to have expected this. He shrank his body and dodged the attack. Flying Herb was so angry that he stomped his feet. The other archers didn't know if they should shoot or not, so they all asked the guild master for instructions. The guild master was also thinking about a very deep question, so he didn't have time to reply. In the end, the guy at the window dodged the arrow and returned. He pointed at Flying Herb and said, Flying Herb, stand aside. East Wind Arrow, come out here. It's been a long time since you've shown your ability. How dare you plot against me? What? Do you want to silence me? It was quiet below, but this time, it was one of the 26 guild leaders who turned around to take a look. Sure enough, there was a person in his guild's archer team who had his head down gloomily as he was watched by his brothers around him. It was another person who had been singled out. Come out quickly. What are you hiding? I know it's you. Who else would carve their name on an arrow? If you want to hide, grow your IQ. Can't you change your arrow? Do you really think that you can kill me with just one arrow? I'll stand here and let you shoot. Let's see if you can kill me with one more arrow. The East Wind Arrow who was called out suddenly jumped out of his team. He really pulled his bow and released an arrow. He knew that this arrow wouldn't be able to kill someone in one shot. He didn't shoot an arrow, but rather, he shot out his resentment. After releasing this ruthless arrow, East Wind Arrow let out a long breath. He didn't care whether he hit the target or not. On the other hand, the other guild masters were already looking at East Wind Arrow's guild master. This time, before the guild master could speak, another guild master, who was also an archer, said East Wind Arrow, one of the top 10 archers. He's a great expert. The guild masters looked at each other. They suddenly realized that what they were worried about seemed to be happening bit by bit. They came in a hurry and only cared about getting back their pride. They felt that their powerful army would solve all problems wherever they went. They actually didn't think too much about their opponents. This was because they felt that it was completely unnecessary. Even if they thought about it, most of them were thinking about the terrifying Qianli's Drunken. Under the glory of Qianli's Drunken, they more or less ignored the other extremely powerful experts. Even if they thought about these experts, they would still compare their strength with Qianli's Drunken. They only thought about it from the perspective of combat, but they neglected the fact that this extremely powerful group of experts had an even more terrifying power than Qianli's Drunken in such a large-scale group battle: connections. That's right, connections. In a group battle, it was always about who could call more people. Who could call more people? Naturally, it was people who had a lot of friends. So, even though some people's individual strength wasn't that great, they were still outstanding because they had enough friends. 26 guilds, more than 20,000 people. They obviously had enough people. It was impossible for anyone to call so many people on their own. However, at this moment, after being scolded by their opponents, the guild leaders finally realized this serious problem. In this group fight, who could compare with these extremely heaven-defying experts in terms of connections? Sword Demon, unscathed in battle, Yuqian Shenming, Brother Yu. Which one of them wasn't a famous figure in the game? These people had experience, they had strength, and they definitely didn't lack connections. The guy standing at the window cursing wasn't a thief, a warrior, an archer, or a knight. He was a cleric, the cleric that had just been scolded by Soaring Grass for being a drunkard. Who was this person? How could anyone with a bit of experience in the game not know this? If you didn't know, it meant that you didn't have any experience in the game. Soaring Grass and Dongfang Jian were both core experts in their respective guilds. They were the kind of experts who would definitely have a few supporters if they left their guilds. At this moment, the other party had already pointed out their names, and Flying Herb had already admitted that they were old friends. Although the two of them had displayed an attitude of disregard for each other, in the eyes of the guild leaders, this was much scarier than greeting each other and exchanging pleasantries. This was because their impoliteness was clearly established on the basis of their solid relationship. Only the best of friends could mock and kill each other without affecting their relationship. Soaring Grass and Dongfang Jian were friends, and they weren't normal friends either. But if they knew that their opponents were their friends, why didn't they say so earlier? Could it be that they were doing this on purpose, preparing to betray them before the battle? Of the 26 guild masters, 24 of them were already suspiciously sizing up Soaring Grass and Dongfang Jian. However, both of the guild leaders shook their heads. Even if Soaring Grass and Dongfang Jian were old friends, their relationship with these two wasn't shallow either. Everyone had been fighting together not long after they entered the parallel world, and they had been hanging out together until now. Towards friends, no matter if it was saying that the new was better than the old, or that they liked the new and hated the old, one side would always feel disappointed. The two of them felt that Soaring Grass and Dongfang Jian wouldn't do something like betraying them in front of the battle. But they still followed their guild to attack their old friends. Weren't they afraid that their old friends would feel disappointed? Or perhaps they didn't care about this at all? Now that he thought about it, the guy who was cursing from the window of the clock tower looked down on Infandel's hat and hairstyle, mocked the Eastern Arrow and the name carved on the arrow, but didn't mention a word about them disregarding their friendship and coming from afar to attack them. In just a short while, one more of the 26 guild masters had an ugly expression on their faces. This was because the guy standing at the window scolded another person. This time, it wasn't an archer, but a mage. Naturally, the scolding was aimed at those insignificant places. However, the mage's degree of grievance was much more serious than Soaring Grass and Dongfang Jian. This was because the window that Han family young master was standing at was outside of the mage's attack range. The archer could still release arrows to vent, but the mage could only stare. Young Master Han's voice didn't reach a particularly large area of effect. However, The key point was that every one of the players he spoke of was a core member of their respective guilds. Naturally, these people stood at the forefront of the battle. Their guild leaders were in the best viewing seats, while they were only in the secondary seats. Hence, every one of them heard his words very clearly. Once a name was called out, there was no way to hide it. Of course, the brothers in their own guilds knew who they were, and once they were called out, they would be surrounded. Seeing that there were already people from 6 guilds who were called out, the guild masters were anxious, but they didn't know how to deal with this matter. The 6 brothers who were called out seemed to be angrily scolding the guys above, but people who understood what was going on knew that it was just a challenge between friends, and not real anger at all. At this time, the guild masters just didn't know what the other party's intention was. The 6 guild masters who were called out were thinking about how to talk to the 6 experts who were called out, while the other 20 guild masters were anxious at this time. Usually, they despised the number of famous experts in their guild, but at this time, they were afraid that there were too many famous experts. Looking at the 6 people who were called out, they were all top-notch experts, and some of them were even a bit famous in the past. The pressure was huge. Chapter 947. Just as the guild leaders were at a loss as to what to say, the cleric who was cursing at them from the window suddenly retreated. Just as the 26 of them were about to heave a sigh of relief, they saw the priest retreat and a warrior step forward. In his hand was the paper trumpet that the priest had used. He pressed the trumpet against his mouth and said, "Hey, hey." After testing the trumpet, he asked, "Can you hear me?" He's actually doing a relay. The guild leaders were in tears. Was there a need to explain why this person had stepped forward? As expected, after testing the trumpet, this person yelled at the top of his lungs, "Barley Huang! Come out, I see you." The crowd was very quiet. After young Master Han had called out 6 names in a row, the crowd couldn't help but fall into a certain rhythm. Inexplicably, they had a sense of curiosity and anticipation about who would be called next. Now that they heard a name that they didn't know, everyone craned their necks to look left and right to see if there was any commotion, and that person would be called there. It was the same for the 26 guild leaders. They would only recognize people from their own guild. Every time they called out a name, they would look at which guild leader had a strange expression. Then they would know which guild it was. In the end, after this person was called out, the 26 guild leaders looked at each other. In the end, they all had a questioning look on their faces. None of them could see anything strange. Thus, someone asked in the party channel, "Which guild is he from?" No one replied. It wasn't that there were guild leaders who were dishonest. It was just that none of the 26 guild leaders knew this person's name. Unscathed in battle took a look and felt that the effect of his calling out a name was too much of a difference compared to that of Han family young master. The guy who was pointed at did not react at all, nor did he look like he was being watched. This made Zhang Wushang feel very embarrassed. He was a little worried that he had seen wrongly, so he quickly picked up his binoculars to confirm it. Unscathed in battle completely recognized the person's face. It was definitely Barley Huang. "Fuck, you ungrateful thing." Unscathed in battle was anxious. Who was the one who taught you how to play the warrior? Now that you've grown your hair, you dare to pretend that you don't know me? This scolding even revealed some of the details of their past interactions. The guy who was being stared at by Wushang finally reacted. He jumped out angrily and shouted, "Fuck, I've changed my ID now. How would I know that the barley yellow you called is me? Damn it, if it's not you, who else could it be? Fuck, if I could still be barley yellow, why would I change my ID?" When everyone heard this, they understood. This guy probably didn't manage to get his old ID when he registered for the parallel world, and it was used by someone else. This phenomenon was very common in the parallel world, the online game that unified the world. Why didn't you tell me you changed your ID? Why didn't I tell you? When did you say that? Fuck, how would I remember? He still didn't say anything, did he? 20,000 people started crying. Killing intent, brother. Everyone came with killing intent. If this continued, their killing intent would go into the negatives. The elites of the tower also looked at Unscathed in battle with disdain. Yutian Shenming went up to pull him down. Fuck, Stop showing off your intelligence. It's embarrassing. Let me do it. What's the rush? I see a few. I see a few. Yu Tianxinming yelled. Go to the window over there and shout. It'll be messy if more people shout, Yu Tianxinming said. Then let's wait a bit. Unscathed in battle didn't want to give way. He had just shouted one, and he wasn't satisfied yet. The 26 guild leaders couldn't wait for the players to call out names one by one. After a brief discussion in the channel, they gave the order to attack. The players were quite amused when they heard names being called out. Suddenly, they received an order from their guild leader to do something with killing intent. For a moment, they were a bit dazed and their movements were a bit slow. However, the attack was still sent out. Unscathed in battle and Yu Tianxinming were still talking at the window. Suddenly, there was a gust of wind below. How could the archer Yu Tianxinming not know what it was? He yelled, "Not good," and dodged. Unscathed in battle's reaction wasn't slow either. He hastily ducked, only to hear a series of bang 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 sounds coming from the window. A few arrows flew in through the window and hit the wall, bouncing around. Fuck, why are we fighting just like that? Unscathed in battle said as he crouched down by the window. Don't you think your face is too sarcastic? Yu Tianxinming said. What do we do? Unscathed in battle looked towards Han family young master. Let's go upstairs. Han family young master pointed upwards. Everyone understood what he meant. If they were a bit higher than the archer's range, they could only watch helplessly. However, if they were too high up, they were afraid that the person shouting wouldn't be able to hear them. They would have to use their voice to shout. This Han family young master had shouted enough, so when it was someone else's turn to shout, he didn't care if they were tired or not. Actually, it's because he's too sarcastic. It's just that the opponent's attack was a bit slower, so they piled on top of us. Unscathed in battle whispered to Yu Tianxinming. That's right, it's like that. Yu Tianxinming nodded. The two of them climbed up just like that. Brother Yu was actually quite eager to give it a try, but he wasn't strong enough. He wasn't like Unscathed in battle and Yu Tianxinming, who would fight to the death for something like this, so he could only line up at the end. At this moment, he wanted to follow Unscathed in battle and Yu Tianxinming up the stairs, but when he saw that Han family young master and the others hadn't moved, he stopped and looked at the notebook in his hand. There's still a lot more. The notebook in Brother Yu's hand was a list of the experts and old friends from the 26 guilds. They were all people that they had interacted with in the game. Some of them were close, some were not. Some of them had added each other as friends after entering the game, while others hadn't. Most of them didn't change their IDs, but there were also some who did. Those who had changed their IDs, Brother Yu had found some on the forums, while some had been discovered on the spot. For example, the barley yellow that Unscathed in battle had just pointed out was someone who had changed his ID. Unscathed in battle had also discovered it by chance while observing the scene with his binoculars. As for those like Han family young master, 5 out of 6 of them were just bluffing. He had just randomly called out the IDs, and when the crowd gathered around he was able to confirm his target. After all, there were over 20,000 people. It was quite a coincidence for Unscathed in battle to find someone he knew with his binoculars. At this time, Brother Yu had said, there are still a lot, which meant that Han family young master had only pointed out 6, which was far from enough. In this list of acquaintances, there were a lot of names under Han family young master's name. This was because Han family young master's friend circle and sword demons to a certain extent overlapped. Even Brother Yu didn't know how long these two had been playing together. This was because from the moment Brother Yu entered the online gaming circle, these two were already famous. In terms of seniority, these two were even more senior than Brother Yu. Brother Yu and Unscathed in battle were considered the same generation, while Yu Tianxinming was actually considered a junior. Most of the friends overlapped, and Brother Yu was probably mainly relying on Sword Demon to gather his friends. However, Brother Yu couldn't imagine the scene of Sword Demon standing at the window with his hands on his hips and yelling arrogantly. It wasn't that Sword Demon had never been arrogant, but he definitely wouldn't be arrogant in this kind of place. Sword Demon had already expressed that he would use other methods to deal with it. At that time, Brother Yu suddenly remembered that Sword Demon had asked for information on these guild members when this group of people first came to cause trouble. It was obvious that Sword Demon had long thought of using a peaceful method to solve this matter. Because of the studio's mischief, everyone fought and killed each other. In the end, it was the players who suffered losses. Perhaps the Sword Ghost had already visited the 26 major cities' guilds in private? Brother Yu guessed this, but he didn't ask. I know. You guys shout first. Han Family Young Master heard Brother Yu's reminder and waved his hand. He then took out a bottle of wine from his pocket and drank it. Yun Zhongmu, Jenna. These people were also there. They were also experts, but at this time, they had deeply realized the difference in weight compared to experts like Sword Demon. 10 Guild Alliance? Yun Zhongmu smiled bitterly and shook his head. He realized that this group of experts just didn't want to do it. If they wanted to, their power could completely form a team on the scale of the 10 Guild Alliance. After all, at this stage of the game, the isolation between main cities was no longer a problem, especially for rich people who had the money to buy teleportation scrolls. Seeing that Sword Demon and Han Family Young Master didn't intend to move, Brother Yu didn't ask anymore. He chased after Unscathed in Battle and Yutian Shenming and ran upstairs. Yutian Shenming was now an expert archer. Naturally, he accurately determined the number of floors that were completely out of the archer's range. After reaching the floor, Unscathed in Battle stretched out his head and felt a little dizzy. Damn, can I still hear this? I feel like the wind is so loud. Try it. Yutian Shenming pushed Unscathed in Battle outside. Damn, why are you pushing? Are you trying to murder me? Unscathed in Battle was almost pushed out of the building by Yutian Shenming. He was so shocked that he broke out in a cold sweat. Looking down from here, it was as high as 10 to 20 floors. If he fell, he would definitely be killed instantly. You sure are fast. Yutian Shenming urged. More than 20,000 players looked up at this time. The person who attacked the window immediately disappeared again. The guild masters already knew that they didn't succeed again. However, the world was finally quiet. The guild masters had already given the order to shoot if anyone stuck their head out. There was no need to wait for further orders. Then, the guild masters prepared to discuss how to deal with the matter of being called out. Before the opening remarks of the conference could be said, the crowd suddenly burst into an uproar. All the presidents looked up when they heard the commotion. They saw that Zhan Wushang had suddenly appeared on a higher level. He was holding a paper trumpet and testing the sound. This time he was much higher. The archers couldn't shoot anymore. The guild masters were nervous. It wasn't that they didn't expect the other party to do this. They just hoped that if he was a little higher, they wouldn't be able to hear him clearly because he was too far away. For example, this time, the guild masters didn't give the order to maintain silence. However, they didn't expect the guild players to be so self-aware. Once they saw that he was about to speak again, they very naturally quietened down. Can you not be so curious? The guild masters cried. Chapter 948. What the guild masters didn't want to happen continued. Although the opponents were standing taller and their voices sounded farther away, these two newcomers seemed to be the famous experts Unscathed in Battle and Yutian Shenming. They obviously had a natural advantage in terms of voice, and their voices were much louder than the previous cleric. Therefore, the distance and height weren't a problem. Under the circumstances where the players consciously kept quiet, their voices could still be heard clearly. The roll call was still going on. Seeing the experts being called out one after another, the guild masters felt that they really had to stop them. Therefore, they didn't care about propriety anymore and prepared to call out the names and ask the brothers who were called out what their attitude was. In the end, before they could carry out their plan, a name floated down from the clock tower and made all the guild masters tremble. This name was too sharp, because this was one of their 26 guild masters. Ninth Heaven. One of the 26 guild masters, a warrior profession, and an expert himself. At this time, his name was accurately called out by the people on the clock tower. Under the gaze of the other 25 guild masters, Ninth Heaven was at a loss because he was very sure that he didn't know any of these famous experts. After Ninth Heaven spread his hands to show his innocence, He raised his head and squinted his eyes to look at the window. Who could it be? Not to mention these experts, he didn't even have any friends in the entire Cloud City. At a height of tens of meters, it was really hard to see the face clearly. Ninth Heaven couldn't recognize it at all, but he could see that this person wasn't either enscathed in battle or Yutian Shenming, who were squeezing together at the window and shouting. Just as Ninth Heaven was wondering, the other party shouted again, "Curious who I am, right? Ha, 10,000 points of wind, do you understand now?" 10,000 points of wind. Ninth Heaven's face showed a look of realization. The other guild masters saw it. Oh, this brother has also fallen. In fact, this time, not only were the guild masters at a loss, but the experts on the clock tower were also at a loss. Unscathed in battle, and Yutian Shenming moved to the left and right of Brother Yu. What's the situation? What's the situation? What is this 10,000 points of wind? One of my former forum sock puppets has a very good relationship with this Nine Heavens. Brother Yu said. Fuck, I couldn't tell, brother, you still have a big move hidden up your sleeve. Isn't this a guild leader? Unscathed in battle, and Yutian Shenming flipped through the roster. Ninth Heaven was one of the 26 guild leaders. Brother Yu laughed. You don't want to learn the good stuff, but you want to learn how to play suspense? Why didn't you say so earlier that you know a guild leader? Unscathed in battle said to Yutian Shenming. None of the experts recognized the guild leaders of the 26 guilds. Everyone felt helpless. The parallel world had indeed disrupted a lot of the order of the past. If it was an old MMORPG, friends who knew each other would join the same server and help each other get started together. It was relatively easier to create glory than players who started from scratch. But what about the parallel world? After entering the game, they were randomly assigned 100 main cities. If they weren't so lucky, their comrades would all be assigned together. As a result, everyone started from scratch. In the end, many old guilds couldn't continue their relationship. Sword Demon's Defiant Guild was just one of them. Those who alienated Sword Demon because of their looks, and those who lost to Gu Fei and were disappointed in Sword Demon were definitely not the closest friends to Sword Demon. People like Lu Ku and Deepwater. From the start of the parallel world, everyone basically went their separate ways. This was actually the main reason why the Defiant Guild failed to regroup. As a result, it could only be said that Sword Demon and the other experts didn't know the 26 guild leaders. It could only be said that they were unlucky. But they didn't think that Brother Yu would actually recognize one of them. It was just that he suddenly announced it on the spot. Everyone didn't like this kind of method very much. It was too much like a certain person's style. Don't do it again, don't do it again. Brother Yu hurriedly explained to the two. But this feeling of not revealing anything was really good. Do you remember now? Do you need me to say something to confirm your identity? Brother Yu continued to build a relationship with Ninth Heaven. No need, no need. Add me as a friend first. Ninth Heaven hurriedly shouted. When everyone heard this, it seemed that the private conversation between these two wasn't suitable to be spread out. This showed that the relationship between these two wasn't shallow. After saying this, Ninth Heaven opened the friend button and immediately received a system notification that Brother Yu had added him as a friend. He was stunned for a while before sending a message to Brother Yu. So you're Brother Yu? Yes. Why didn't you tell me earlier? There's nothing to say. If I said I was Brother Yu, would you still worship me? Ninth Heaven was silent for a while and told the truth. Not at all. After all, Brother Yu was different from Sword Demon and Unscathed in battle. He was equivalent to a guy who often ran around in movies, a guy that everyone was familiar with. He had no acting skills, no looks, no aura, and no potential or talent could be seen. Of course, few people would admire and worship such a character. When his name was mentioned, everyone would only say, "Oh, Brother Yu. I know that guy." Unlike Sword Demon and the others, when everyone was mentioned, they could tell a few stories about their experiences. What exactly is the meaning of this now? Ninth Heaven was indeed quite familiar with Brother Yu's sock puppet. When he heard that this person was Brother Yu, he didn't dwell on the sock puppet matter and immediately started discussing the current situation. Please come up and have a seat. How about it? Do you dare? Who are you referring to? Of course it's the 26 presidents, brother, you said. What do you mean? Ninth Heaven was puzzled. I have something to say. Can't say it now. It's not convenient to have too many people, brother, you said. What do you want to say? It's better if everyone says it together, brother, you said. Why? Ditto. Fuck. Ninth Heaven was a little confused. Suddenly, he asked brother you haven't proven your identity. There was one time. Brother you casually picked out a few things that both of them had chatted about. Nine Heavens could only confirm this identity now. With his relationship with brother you, he wouldn't suspect brother you of harming him. I'm fine with it. But don't tell me you want me to convince the others? Ninth Heaven said. He wasn't familiar with the others. Just look at him now. After he was named, the other 25 presidents looked at him differently. They already had the tendency to kick him out of their small circle. There'll be a lot of people to convince. Brother, you said. Ninth Heaven suddenly understood. Fuck, you guys did all this for this. You'll know in a bit that it's actually quite necessary, brother, you said. Then what about me now? Ninth Heaven asked. The experts in the guild have been named one by one. You guys probably can't sit still. The presidents will probably take the initiative to ask, right? Brother, you said. Yeah, that's it. Brother, you said. Then will my guild be selected again? Nine Heavens said. Is it embarrassing to be named? They aren't embarrassing, but I am. Ninth Heaven said. Fuck. People are all being pointed at by top-notch experts. What am I? Brother you're a fucking sock puppet. Ninth Heaven said. Fuck you. Brother you was depressed. Why was he being looked down on everywhere he went? This wasn't right. After Ninth Heaven ended his private chat with brother you, he was met with the questioning gazes of the other presidents. This time, they didn't have to find their own brothers to talk about this slightly awkward question. There was someone else they could ask. They said that they mainly want to talk to us. Ninth Heaven didn't wait for them to ask and directly said. Talk about what? I don't know. Ninth Heaven shook his head. But Ninth Heaven pointed at the clock tower. They dare let us in? They only let the presidents in. The presidents looked at each other, their expressions all suspicious. Ninth Heaven could only smile bitterly. He guessed that everyone was suspecting that he had betrayed them and was preparing to send them into a trap. Ninth Heaven was still in the president's small team. He couldn't even use the team channel. A bunch of presidents all shrank to the side for a small meeting, brazenly pushing Ninth Heaven to the side. What do you think? Someone asked. I think that if they really want to use him to set up a trap, isn't this an unnecessary move? Someone said. I think Ninth Heaven is the same as the brothers who were pointed out. There's not much difference. So, those who were pointed out will say the same thing as us? The presidents weren't stupid after all. So someone immediately went to ask the one who was pointed out. Indeed. The other party also had the intention to say this to the president. Then can't you just say it directly? Just say it directly. Do you dare to enter? Now that there's another person to bring the message. This person stopped halfway. This was a very sensitive question. This was a test of whether everyone trusted the brother who was pointed out. In an instant, everyone was suddenly envious of Ninth Heaven again. He was pointed out directly. He didn't have to go through this torture. Whether it was true or false, they could directly judge. Unlike them, who doubted their opponents and trusted their friends, then considered whether their friends would be deceived, whether their friends would lie to them, whether their friends would collude with the other party. Tangled, contradictory, and hovering between life and death. If they have anything to say, let them say it like this, someone said. If they could say it like this, they would have shouted it long ago. There's no need to go through so much trouble. What's there that they don't dare to say face to face? Who knows? I still think it's a trap. What's the use of a trap? Even if they lure us into the clock tower and we're all killed, so what? At most, our presidents will all drop a level. It's not like we'll be silenced. The discussion was very intense. It was very heaven-defying. This question was obviously very difficult. The bosses of the studios, who were blocked by more than 20,000 people and couldn't see the scene, weren't idle at this time. They couldn't see, but they could ask around. 26 guilds, 26,000 people. It was impossible for all of them to be pure. Even if they were, it was very easy to bribe them into being impure on the spot. Chapter 949. Studios weren't good at fighting, but they were good at gathering information. This was also an important indicator of a studio's strength. Now that everyone was gathered together, there was a bit of competition in this area. I found out what you couldn't find out, and this was something to be proud of. However, there were no bosses that could stand out and be proud of themselves. Although they didn't have to worry about not finding out, they still needed time. Just by looking at the crowd, they already knew that this would be a bit difficult. Even the people from the 26 guilds wouldn't know what was going on unless they were in the innermost circle. As for the bosses, they were in a very miserable position. They were gathered together with the players from Cloud City, but they weren't onlookers. To be more precise, they were onlookers. Right now, the onlookers were small fries from the outer circle of the 26 guilds. How much longer are we going to stay like this? The news hadn't come, and the situation didn't change. The bosses couldn't help but feel anxious. If this continues and the fight doesn't break out, won't our efforts be in vain? The bosses were silent. This situation was very likely to happen. In this stalemate where no one could do anything to the other, the only thing they could do was to communicate. This communication might lead to nothing in the end. This was not a situation that the studios were willing to see. Looks like we have to step in, Matchless Wonder suddenly said. The bosses all looked at him. They obviously understood what Matchless Wonder meant. This was all part of their plan. Isn't it a bit early? Nitrite said. Still early? If this drags on, we won't be able to fight, right? Or is this what you want to see? Unparalleled Wonder knew that there was a hidden meaning in his words whenever he talked to Nitrite. Of course, he had every reason to hate Nitrite so much. The problem is, Qianli is drunk and not online. Isn't this a waste of time? Nitrite said. Really? Qianli is drunk and not online? What's going on? It's almost noon and he's not online yet. What's wrong with him? A boss said. Matchless Hero gritted his teeth. This was a trap he had created, but now he couldn't get out of it. The goal of his cooperation with the studios was to destroy Qianli and ensure that the high-efficiency leveling method business continued. But personally, he was not as concerned about the high-efficiency leveling method as the other studios. He would be happier if the deal was completely ruined. For him, it was just one less profitable project, but Yun Teng would be finished because of it. Unfortunately, the current situation could not be completely destroyed. Yun Teng had also carefully prepared for this transaction. As soon as they started, they established a foothold in 30 main cities. Following which they pulled in other workshops as well. Unparalleled genius couldn't be destroyed, and couldn't be destroyed. He could only think of a way to reduce Yun Teng's profits. As soon as Qianli got drunk, these people continued to oppose him and ruin his plans. Unparalleled Hero's heart raced at the thought of this, and he was warned by the system. Now he had tied all the studios together to deal with Qianli, but everyone's purpose was slightly different. The others only wanted to destroy Qianli so that the high-efficiency leveling method business wouldn't be disturbed. That was all. What about his unparalleled talent? He wanted to use this opportunity to settle his old and new grudges. As a result, he was in a similar situation. He couldn't sit still anymore, but the others wouldn't act until they saw the rabbit. Unparalleled genius took 2 deep breaths. Now was not the time to be angry. He had experienced the system's concern for the health of the players. After calming himself down, Unparalleled genius spoke again. If you guys really want to wait until Qianli gets drunk and goes online, then it'll be a bit troublesome. Based on my long-term observation of this fellow, he would usually come online during peak hours after dinner, which was at least 6 or 7 hours from now. 6 or 7 hours. Do you think this situation can be maintained until then? Moreover, Qianli hasn't come online yet. That in itself is a problem. Knowing that there's going to be a huge battle, Qianli's drunk isn't online. What do you guys think this means? Unparalleled Genius said. It's very overpowered. They're planning to settle this peacefully. Someone blurted out. That's right, it's very overpowered. Isn't the current situation forcing the 26 guilds to sit down and settle this with them? Unparalleled Genius said. Damn it, what's going on up ahead? Why haven't we heard anything yet? Under Unparalleled Wonder's provocation, the already anxious boss finally reached Unparalleled Wonder's state of anxiety and could no longer sit still. But if they fight now, it won't be easy for them to last 6 or 7 hours, someone said. Ah! Unparalleled Wonder laughed. If a fight really broke out, would 8,000 Miles Drunk wait until nighttime to log in? That's right. Another owner exclaimed. He'll definitely be called up. That's why we don't need to worry about whether or not Qianli will be able to make it in time. There's no way he'll miss it. What we need to do is make sure that this situation happens, Unparalleled Genius concluded. Let's do it. Yeah. We can't wait any longer. Unparalleled Genius's analysis was quite successful this time. Many owners stood on his side. Unparalleled Genius glanced at Nitrite Radical proudly. He had always suspected that there was more to Nitrite Radical and very overpowered. However, he had purposely tied Nitrite Radical into this matter. This was one of his cleverness. If the Nitrite Radicals were to be tied together, then the Nitrite Radicals and the extremely heaven-defying group would have fallen out with each other and would no longer be related. If the matter didn't work out, then it would be a different story. If the matter didn't work out because of the Nitrite Radicals, then he would have ruined everyone's business and cut off everyone's source of income. He would have no way of shirking his responsibility. If there were other reasons, then there was nothing to say. The result would be that no one would be able to do business and the Nitrite Radicals wouldn't be spared. In the end, the most important thing was that Unparalleled Genius had Qinqi as his trump card. Otherwise, why would it be said that the ownership of production materials was the most important? No matter what, shouldn't we wait for this wave of news to come back? Nitrite Radical said when he saw the owner's impatient expressions. Bossya, why are you so calm? Is it because you've earned enough efficient leveling methods? Unparalleled Genius said in a strange tone. No matter what, he would not let Yunteng go. Therefore, he had to blame Yunteng. I just think that our large-scale promotion is only a backup plan. If possible, everyone would still want to sit back and observe the situation, right? It hasn't been long since the situation started. Isn't it a little too rushed for us to start the backup plan now? Nitrite Radical said. The backup plan is to be used according to the situation. What does it have to do with time? In the current situation, the earlier we use the backup plan, the better it is. Bossya, you don't like this backup plan. Are you afraid that some of your friends won't be too happy? Unparalleled Genius sneered. In his opinion, Nitrite Radical had a reason to not want the studio to be involved too much. He still wanted to continue working with very overpowered. This kid wanted to earn money but didn't want to offend anyone. Unparalleled Genius was determined not to let him get what he wanted. He had to make him suffer. After another round of debate, Unparalleled Genius had the upper hand. The bosses all ordered their subordinates to start moving. The people from the studios that were scattered all over Cloud City immediately began to incite the crowd, calling everyone to fight against the invaders. From the leveling area, to the tavern, to the revival point, to the crowd that was already gathered around the clock tower to watch the show, the bosses had already started to quickly leave. In their opinion, once the battle started, this place would definitely become the center of the war. It would be too dangerous to watch the show from a close distance. Inciting the crowd always took time. The workers of the studios worked hard to give speeches everywhere, while the bosses quietly waited for news. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. After a long time, Cloud City was still peaceful. Some bosses couldn't help but look at the crowd that was watching the show. It was no different from when they left. In their opinion, that place should be the easiest place to incite anger. They also had the most people there. However, half an hour had passed. Why wasn't there any commotion? It was as if nothing had happened? The bosses couldn't sit still anymore and asked. The answer was that the incitement was continuing. Of course, The bosses didn't know the lowest level of incitement. They all had people in charge in this area, and these people in charge were sweating cold sweat. They didn't know why, but the incitement work in Cloud City wasn't going well. The people they sent to incite were all sarcastic. Everyone agreed that the players in Cloud City were very heartless and cold-blooded. When the people in charge first heard this report, they didn't believe it at all. They personally went to verify it, changed many places, and found that the situation was very real. It was just that they were heartless. The people in charge who personally went to the field found that the players clearly had the desire to kill them. Why was it like this? The people in charge were puzzled. At this time, the boss asked another question. They didn't know how to answer, so they could only delay it for the time being. Of course, not all the people in charge used the stall tactic. There were also some who told the truth. As a result, a shop owner immediately jumped out and shouted, "Damn, are the players of Cloud City all heartless? Can't we incite them? How could there be such a thing?" Most of the bosses received the incitement to continue tactic. They didn't think about it at all. "It's true. My people said it," the boss said. The bosses laughed and felt that this guy's subordinates didn't do their job well. Then, the bosses received similar reports one after another. Then, another piece of information came through. Today, the guild leader of a certain guild in Cloud City specially ordered them not to get into conflict with players from other cities. If anyone tried to provoke them, they should resolutely ignore them. Chapter 950. If this information was only heard by one person, the bosses would not care too much. Everyone had their own ambitions. At times like this, they would want to preserve their own strength and prevent their guild members from participating in the possible war. However, at this moment, the rumors encountered a strange obstacle that they had never encountered before. This piece of information was very thought-provoking. The bosses looked at each other and did not communicate. They immediately ordered their respective guilds to inquire about the information. This time, the results came very quickly. The bosses were speechless. All of the guild leaders they asked had given the same instruction, without exception. Was this a coincidence? All the guild leaders thought of the same thing? Or was it a private agreement between the guild leaders? However, the problem was that there was no need to make an agreement for this kind of thing. If they were willing to participate, then so be it. If they were not willing, then so be it. If they were willing to participate, then it was reasonable for them to make an agreement. The bosses felt that something was wrong, but they did not say anything. They had already given their respective orders, hoping to get more detailed and accurate information. However, after asking around, the results were as such. The guild leaders of the various guilds only gave such an order, and there wasn't much explanation for it. After a moment of silence, someone finally spoke. "What do you guys think?" "I don't believe this is a coincidence," someone said. "Nonsense, how can there be such a coincidence? If it's a mutual agreement, then why? For this kind of thing, if other guilds are willing to participate, then let them do it. We won't lose out even if we don't participate. It seems like there is no need to make an agreement and not participate." Someone voiced out the question that everyone had in their hearts. Could it be like this? Suddenly, someone said, "According to the analysis, very overpowered should be quite hated in Cloud City. These guilds made such an agreement. Perhaps they are taking the opportunity to use this group of external forces to eliminate very overpowered? It's very overpowered. Originally, it wasn't popular. But after 8,000 Miles Drunk popularized the high-efficiency leveling method in Cloud City, the situation seems to have changed." Another person said. The previous boss immediately smiled. "Yes, the Cloud City players' view of them is very likely to change because of this, but some people will not." The guild leaders. All the bosses suddenly understood. That's right. The more normal players were grateful to extremely defiant, the more guild leaders would be envious and jealous of extremely defiant. Most people wouldn't have such emotions, but the president did. The opportunity before them didn't count as hitting them while they were down. It was just a matter of self-preservation, which would allow them to face a calamity. The guild leaders probably didn't want to miss this opportunity, which was why they had issued such an order together. This command was very simple and easy to understand. It didn't require much explanation, and the guild players didn't think too much about it. Unlike the bosses of the studio, they could not discover such coincidences through information channels. At most, they only knew the decision of the guild in their small circle of friends, not to mention that most people's circle of friends were basically comrades in the same guild. How can the guilds in Cloud City be so united? Some bosses were still a little confused. Of course, not all guilds. Let me ask everyone here, out of all the guilds you've asked around, have any of them been small guilds below level 4? A person said. All the bosses looked at each other, and in the end, they all shook their heads. Only large guilds had commercial value. There wasn't a second guild that was as small and strong as Extremely Defiant. The human resources of the studio weren't limitless, and with limited resources, who would invest in a small guild with no future? Of course, they all tried their best to keep their information channels open with the large guilds, so none of the guild information they gathered was about the small guilds. I think there should be a lot of small guilds that didn't participate in this agreement, but they're alone and need to observe the situation. In this situation where the large guilds have made their stance clear, their stance is also clear, so our instigation didn't have any reaction. Because we can't instigate the large guilds, these small guilds see that the large guilds aren't moving, so of course they won't move. Makes sense? Everyone nodded. The world is dangerous. It's not a good thing to be a tall tree that attracts the wind. Another boss lamented. Matchless Hero listened on the side, and his lamentation didn't feel good. He had been so miserable recently, and when he heard the saying, "tall tree attracts the wind," he couldn't help but think that this old man was implying something about him. As for this discussion, Matchless Hero didn't say a word, because the discussion of the bosses was beyond his expectations. When he discovered this situation, his first thought was that Extremely Defiant was prepared and organized all the guilds to prevent anyone from taking the opportunity to cause trouble. But before he could say anything, the bosses all came up with a version that the guilds in Cloud City wanted to kill with a borrowed knife. This time, Matchless Hero was in a daze. Everyone's analysis was very reasonable, and the possibility was very high. In comparison, his own assumption was a bit oversensitive. Did he think too highly of Extremely Defiant? Moreover, this was Extremely Defiant, so what was there to be afraid of? Should he stop it? Wasn't that a good thing to help them out? Boss Guy, why aren't you saying anything this time? I wonder if he's hiding something from us again. After the bosses finished their discussion, they realized that Matchless Genius hadn't said a word this time. From this, it could be seen that Matchless Hero had a very strong presence. Even if he didn't say anything, everyone could still sense it. Everyone's analysis is very reasonable. I was originally wondering if Extremely Defiant was up to something, but now that everyone has said it, I can relax. Matchless Hero was still trying to find a way to express his doubts. Extremely Defiant? Why are they doing this? Do they really want to challenge these 26 guilds? So they told the guilds in Cloud City not to interfere? Someone laughed. In his heart, he felt that Matchless Hero was being a bit too worried. Then what do you guys think we should do? Matchless Hero said, I think we can continue to incite them. Since we already know this situation, we need to find a different way to incite them. Even though these guilds are small, a single spark can start a prairie fire. We should be able to use it as a fuse. Once the situation escalates, the bigger guilds will have no choice but to join in. If it really doesn't work, we can just send some people to sneak into the crowd and start a fight. The bosses were all geniuses. They had more and more ideas than the last. Let's continue. Matchless Hero nodded. The incitement continued. Of course, their strategy had been adjusted. When faced with players from guilds who had banned them, they no longer fanned the flames like before. Instead, they would say things like, I heard that XX guild doesn't allow players to do this and that, or, why aren't the big guilds doing anything? They were trying to reveal the secret agreement between the big guilds to the normal players. Then, when faced with players who weren't from guilds or players from small to medium-sized guilds, they would continue their previous path of fanning the flames. The inciters' hearts grew colder and colder. They realized that not only were there no effects, but they seemed to have become mature. This was because no one else was saying these things. The rumors were always spread by them, and no one else was discussing them. As time went on, the gossipers became more and more isolated. They felt more and more like they had been stripped naked and thrown in front of everyone. The people in charge of the various studios realized that the situation wasn't good. They stopped inciting the rumors and reported to their bosses. This time, they weren't saying that Cloud City's players were heartless or that their willpower was too strong. The experienced people in charge had already noticed that this resistance to rumors wasn't a coincidence. This was a deliberate precaution against them. The bosses believed in the professional judgment of their subordinates and were shocked. They all looked at Matchless Hero in unison. Is it really so overpowered that they took precautions? If it's really overpowered, why would they do this? Matchless Hero said in a deep voice. To protect the interests of the Cloud City players? Do you think they are that noble? This? I don't know, I'm not sure. Someone said. Fuck, if they have such thoughts, why did they do this during the city war? In the entire parallel world, only the Cloud City players didn't get any benefits from the city war. It's because they were overpowered and took away the benefits that should have belonged to the players. That's not the same thing, right? That's the rule of the game. A boss said. Fuck, what about Qianli's drunk? Can a player with quality kill people all over the world like he did? Matchless Hero said. This time, everyone was speechless. Qianli's drunk reputation was out there. Just based on the PK points he broke time and time again, who would believe that he wasn't a demon? Extremely heaven-defying people are definitely not noble. Matchless Genius concluded. Then why are they doing this? Do they already have a 100% way to deal with the 26 guilds? A boss said and looked towards the direction of the clock tower. Although they weren't there anymore, they still left people to monitor the situation. The information they received was the same as when they left. Or perhaps, this move of theirs is to guard against us. Matchless Genius said. Fuck, are they immortals or monsters? How can they know about Qianli's actions when we're so far away? A boss didn't believe it. Bossya, what do you think? Matchless Hero suddenly changed the topic. Nitrite, who hadn't said a word, was unfortunately shot again. Chapter 951. Unparalleled Wonder was once again suspecting nitrite radicals and a very heaven-defying conspiracy. All the bosses looked over and saw nitrite radical's expression of helplessness. He said, Boss Guy, if you always think that way, you might as well tell me to stay far away and wait for your news. Ha, I believe you, Matchless Wonder said with a fake smile. Matchless Genius put on a fake smile. I'm just reminding you. I'm afraid you might accidentally stand on the opposite side of us. Matchless Wonder said that reminding nitrite radical was fake, but in reality, he was hinting that nitrite radical might not be on the same side as them. This was why Matchless Wonder wanted nitrite radical and Yun Teng to be together. He was always looking for an opportunity to make nitrite radical and Yun Teng be ostracized in their circle. Nitrite radical didn't say anything and just shook his head. The other bosses didn't seem to understand the hidden meaning in Matchless Hero's words. They all laughed it off and brought the topic back to how they were going to proceed. The incitement plan had failed, but they had still wasted a lot of time. It had been more than an hour since they started. Everyone, time is of the essence. I have a backup plan that might work, Matchless Wonder said. Boss Guy, tell us. Matchless Wonder smiled sinisterly but didn't say anything. He just looked in a certain direction. The bosses all looked in the direction he was looking at and saw a group of people walking over. When they got closer, they recognized them as Matchless Wonder's subordinates. They had seen them before, but since they wanted to watch a show, they didn't want to group up, so they sent their subordinates away. The group of people walked over and stood behind Matchless Wonder. Matchless Wonder stood to the side and showed them to the others, saying, "Everyone look." Look at what? The bosses froze. Weren't they just his subordinates? What was there to look at? Look at the equipment? What a joke. They were all bosses of studios. Even if their resources couldn't compare to Ing Chi's, it was still easy for them to create a dozen high-quality characters. Everyone look carefully. Matchless Wonder said. Boss guy, didn't you say that time was of the essence? Why are you keeping us in suspense? Someone couldn't help but say. As soon as he finished speaking, some of the shop owners noticed the details. They took a few steps closer and stared at the badges on their chests. These badges, not bad. This is the emblem of the guild Flying Moon, Matchless Genius said. Flying Moon of Dragon City was one of the 26 guilds. Matchless elites had actually made a copy of this guild's emblem, so their goal was obvious. There are other things here. Matchless Hero waved his hand, and his subordinates took out many wooden boxes. Each box had a symbol on it, and they opened it for the bosses to see. These were the emblems of the 26 guilds, one for each guild. Apart from that, there were also several pages of paper inside the boxes. Some of the bosses pulled out the pages and saw that it recorded the equipment of their guild's elite experts. The boss was taken aback. Then he scanned the boxes and asked, "Where's the Flying Moon from Dragon City?" Matchless Genius smiled as he handed over the list of Flying Moon's experts. That person took the box and glanced at the group of people behind Matchless Genius. He exclaimed, "Boss guy, your disguise is really thorough." Matchless Genius smiled. "This is fully utilizing our advantage. Only our workshop can disguise to this extent. I think everyone understands what I mean, right? It's not just the badges. With our workshop's ability, we can disguise all of these people's equipment. Everyone, take a look at this list of equipment. If it's convenient, we can disguise ourselves as 2 guilds. Is that okay?" "No problem," the bosses said as they began to prepare themselves. Matchless Genius walked in front of Nitrite and personally handed him a box. "Boss Nitrite, you only need to disguise as 1 guild." The bosses all looked over and saw the word, "Defy," written on the box that Matchless Genius handed Nitrite. It was very overpowered. Everyone guessed it. Matchless Genius smiled sinisterly. Nitrite had to accept this box even if he didn't want to. Nitrite didn't seem troubled at all. He took the box and opened it as he said, "If it's very overpowered, how many people can't disguise it? I've prepared this for you too." Matchless Genius waved his hand, and someone handed him a sword. The bosses were all shocked. The Dark Knight Light Sword? But then, everyone realized that it wasn't the Dark Knight Light Sword. It just looked like it, but it was a genuine fake. You just need to pretend. Boss Nitrite wouldn't really pretend to be the real Chenli Drunk, right? Even if I gave you the real Dark Knight Light Sword, you wouldn't be able to disguise it, Matchless Genius said. Boss guy, you really put a lot of effort into this. Nitrite took the fake sword. How much effort did he put in to get this? Outsiders didn't know, but they could see that Matchless Genius had put in a lot of effort to fix the very overpowered and Chenli Drunk. As for the dagger called Sword Demon, I think Boss Nitrite should be able to disguise it yourself, right? Sword Demon's trademark isn't his dagger, it's his skill, Nitrite said. Then you'll have to figure out a way to overcome it, Boss Nitrite. What about the dance style of the thin waist dance? Boss Nitrite, I agree that these people can't be replicated. You can choose not to let them appear, or you can disguise them. You don't need me to teach you that, do you? I'm just afraid of making a loophole, Nitrite said. We'll help you keep an eye on it. If you make a loophole, we'll remind you, Matchless Genius said with a double meaning. The other bosses were already numb to the bickering between the two, so they didn't pay attention to them. They each held 2 badge boxes and took the equipment list to their subordinates, asking them to send equipment over. Studios were extremely efficient. It didn't take long for the people to arrive and the equipment to be delivered. The bosses would then distribute the equipment one by one according to the list. Finally, they would wear the badge and the experts would immediately copy it. Who were they? The studio. In the game, other than Gu Fei, Thin Waist Dance, and Sword Demon, there was no equipment that they didn't have. Just as Matchless Genius said, this was the advantage of their studio. Matchless Genius had thought of this a long time ago. The equipment list and badges were all prepared, but he didn't tell anyone about it beforehand. He was still guarding against the Nitrite radicals. Even if Nitrite really colluded with very overpowered to sabotage the studio, it was already an urgent matter. What could the other party do if they found out? The cosplay teams of the studios finished equipping themselves. The bosses opened up the map and divided up the areas. They immediately sent these guys out to cause trouble. On the other hand, nitrite radicals also joined in. They could stand on the side of Cloud Peak City and no longer spread rumors. Instead, they could lead the resistance against the invasion. They could mobilize the masses and provoke the 26 guilds, throwing the situation into chaos. Matchless Genius finally smiled proudly as he thought of his plan. He felt that this plan was impeccable. The fighters of the studios weren't weak. With the studios spending a lot of money to equip them, they would immediately be at the top of the world. Wouldn't it be a piece of cake for them to bully normal players? In an instant, it was as if a group of hooligans had suddenly appeared in Cloud City, causing trouble everywhere. If they bumped into someone, kill. If they couldn't make a deal, kill. If they were muttered behind their backs, kill. If they weren't pleasing to the eye, kill. In short, the teams started killing their way to their respective areas of disruption. The people they killed along the way were all normal players. Soon Cloud City was in chaos. Very Overpowered appeared at the right time and mobilized the players to counterattack. Many of the people who were killed in the process had received orders from their guilds not to participate. However, now that they were killed, how could they not fight back? They all roared in their guilds. The 4 Cs, colorful clouds, singing to wine, guns and roses, black and white alliance of life and death, etc., big and small, old and new, strong and weak, all of them were attacked. Some died, some survived, but they were all filled with anger. The arrogance and unreasonableness of the other party was intolerable. When the guild leader received the report, he was shocked. His first reaction wasn't to appease the guild members, but to inform very defiant of the news. Oh, finally can't sit still anymore? In the clock tower, after receiving the news, the Han family young master sneered. However, Sword Demon and the others had serious expressions. Their gazes all looked directly opposite them. Directly opposite them were the 26 guild leaders who participated in this expedition. In the end, the guild leaders still entered the clock tower to meet with Sword Demon and the others because they really had no other choice. They were in a stalemate under the clock tower. The other party had at most 200 people, but they had more than 20,000 people. If this continued, who knew who would be in pain? The people who came to bring the message all promised their guild leaders that they had something to say this time, and it wouldn't be a trap or a trap. Some guild leaders believed them happily, but some still had doubts. In the end, Very Overpowered threw down several teleportation scrolls, but only one of the 26 guild leaders was sent up to see the situation. Why this guild leader? Because this was obviously a suicide mission, and it was too embarrassing to send a player. In the end, everyone drew lots, and this guy was lucky enough to get the chance to choose one of the 26. Therefore, under everyone's comfort of, it's okay, at most I'll drop a level, this guild leader stripped off his top-grade equipment and went up to the clock tower. Once he went up, he immediately felt relieved. There weren't many very overpowered people in the clock tower. If all 26 guild leaders went up, they would even have the advantage in numbers. Moreover, the other party's super expert, Qianli, was drunk and simply not around. What was there to be afraid of? Therefore, all the guild leaders were teleported up to the clock tower to see how this stalemate could be broken. Chapter 952. What did Very Overpowered want to say? Before they opened their mouths, the guild leaders all had their own plans. They were the type of people who frequently interacted with people, so they could see the situation clearly. Very Overpowered probably wanted to explain the whole thing and then resolve it peacefully. However, what was there to explain about this matter? The guild leaders already understood the whole situation. Their subordinates came to fight against Very Overpowered for the sake of the reward, but in the end, they were completely defeated. Of course, their original intention wasn't Very Overpowered. Were they supposed to just wait for death? If this matter ended just like that, there wouldn't be any guild leader who would muster such a large force to take revenge. At most, the guild leader would come to lend a helping hand in private. After all, they wouldn't do so in the name of the guild. But the various rumors that spread around the main cities undoubtedly pushed them to the edge of the fire. The guild leaders couldn't tolerate it, and neither could their fellow guild members. What they needed to do now wasn't to find very overpowered for an explanation. They were in the wrong, so what explanation did they need? Their goal was to use very overpowered to rebuild their guild's image. This matter didn't even need to mention Feng Shuang's previous actions. The main problem was that their guild was being slandered and ridiculed. This was the reason. Coming to Cloud City to destroy very overpowered was the result they wanted. There were many things in this world that couldn't be explained by right and wrong. The guild leaders had already made up their minds. Did they want to reason with this matter? There was no need to say anything. They came up to meet with very overpowered just because it wasn't a good idea to stay outside the clock tower. They had no other choice. Now that they knew there was no trap in the tower, some guild leaders had already taken care of this guy and asked if they wanted to go in. No rush. We're already at this point, there's no rush to make a move. At this moment, it's fine to let them talk. The guild leaders teleported to the clock tower and were already prepared for battle. But when they arrived, the first thing they heard was, "There's wine at the staircase. If you want it, take it yourself." The guild leaders couldn't help but look towards the staircase. Sure enough, there was a lot of wine there, and it was good wine. Being a guild leader of a big guild didn't necessarily mean that they were rich. Most people wouldn't be able to bear to drink such good wine. Sure enough, there were people among the 26 guild leaders who loved wine. 3 of them couldn't help but want to grab a bottle. The others frantically tried to stop them with glares, but the 3 of them had long since lost their ground. Each of them took a bottle and drank as they returned to their group. They even asked the others, "You guys don't want it?" All the presidents had tears streaming down their faces. "How can the 3 of you be the president? Haven't you heard of the saying that you have to be soft-hearted when you eat from others? Just a little bit of good wine can corrupt you?" The 3 of them continued to act without any self-awareness. As they drank, they discussed, "This is good wine. Have you tried it before?" "Nonsense, of course I've drunk it, but who would be willing to buy it normally? Look, there are still a lot of them. They don't want to drink." "It's all ours?" "I don't think so. There are still some heaven-defying people here." "Aren't they going to die soon?" "Oh, that's right." All the presidents were on the verge of crying when they heard the conversation between the 3 of them in the channel. They actually remembered what they were here for. But why did it feel like they were robbing them of wine? "Since you asked us to come up, why don't you cut it short now?" Some presidents couldn't bear to see the 3 of them continue to be unreasonable and took the initiative to talk to the heaven-defying people. "All right, actually we aren't familiar with each other. No need for introductions." A president interrupted Han Family Young Master's words with a rough voice. Han Family Young Master glanced at this person and continued to speak calmly. "What I mean is that we aren't familiar with each other, so there's nothing much to say. I invited all of you here because I want to invite all of you to watch a show." "Watch a show?" All the presidents were at a loss. What the other party said was completely different from what they had imagined. "What show?" someone asked. "Let's see if your subordinates outside will continue to wait obediently after all of you guild masters are here," Han Family's young master said. "What do you mean?" All the presidents didn't understand. "Why don't we make a bet? I bet that your people will soon be disobedient," Han Family Young Master laughed. "Disobedient? How would that be considered disobedient?" "For example, running around, killing someone, setting a fire," Han Family Young Master said. "Interesting." A president couldn't help but laugh coldly. "What if you lose the bet?" Some presidents already had the intention to participate. Other than wine lovers, there were also gambling lovers among the 26 of them. "Jump down from here." Han Family Young Master knocked on the window beside him. "Interesting, I've never seen such a flying person before." A president laughed. This was true. Anything could happen in the game, but no one would be stupid enough to play this kind of high jump. Even if someone was curious and wanted to watch, they couldn't just randomly grab someone off the street and throw them down from high ground, right? Even if it was a game, this kind of behavior would be very cruel. After all, most of the gamers were normal people. Even if their true nature was exposed in the virtual world, there weren't that many perverts. Not only will you have the chance to watch today, you might even have the chance to act as a flying person yourself, Han Family Young Master said. The president's expression immediately changed. Whoever loses will jump. Is there a need to explain? Han Family Young Master said. Of course there was no need to explain, but the problem was that the presidents didn't expect the other party to want them to make such a bet. They thought that if they were to bet, the other party would definitely ask them to leave if they lost. In the end, the conditions were exactly the same. With such conditions, even if they won the bet, what benefits would they get? Fall to death? Moreover, there was something wrong with the gamble he proposed. What were these heaven-defying fellows planning? The presidents sized up the group of overpowered people standing opposite them. They were all looking at them calmly as if waiting for their reply. There were only two fellows who were huddled by a window in the room and seemed to be fighting over something. This clearly didn't match the current atmosphere. The presidents were confused, but the two people seemed to sense that everyone was looking at them and turned around. Ahem! The older warrior coughed and said, "The scenery isn't bad. Only an idiot would believe that they were fighting over the scenery." However, the young man quickly spoke. "I say, bosses, don't your guilds recruit beauties?" The presidents wanted to vomit blood. These two shameless people were actually looking at the beauties of their guilds. Female players were already a rare species, not to mention beautiful players. All the guilds treated their beautiful girls as treasures. At this moment, they were actually being groped in such a wretched manner. They immediately felt as if someone was trying to steal their divine beast. The presidents were furious, but if they exploded because of this, wouldn't they be like the three guys who smiled at the sight of alcohol? Thus, they endured and didn't say anything, pretending that they didn't see the two idiots. Everyone was still thinking about the bet just now. This seemed like a bet that they would definitely win, but after the other party brought it up, they started to discuss it cautiously, as if it was another huge trap. "You guys don't even dare to do this?" Han Family Young Master asked. It was a very common method of provocation, but it depended on who was using it. When it came to Han Family Young Master, that expression, that tone, and even the corner of his mouth, it made people feel like they were being looked down on and looked down on. If they didn't agree, they wouldn't be men. Some of the presidents who were weaker in this area wanted to agree. Luckily, there were 26 of them. The three who were holding the alcohol weren't able to stop them, but this time, they were able to stop them in time. Let's discuss it properly," Han Family Young Master said. The presidents were very obedient and seriously discussed it. "You all came from afar to regain your face. You have already dilly-dallied outside the clock tower for half a day, and now you want to continue dilly-dally over a small bet. How long are you all planning to embarrass yourselves for?" "Fuck, what did you say?" The presidents were instantly enraged. Some of them had already picked up their weapons. Han Family Young Master didn't panic. "Don't attack, that is pointless. I gave you many of those teleportation scrolls." The presidents immediately understood what he meant. As long as they sent a message, they would be able to teleport in with enough people. The ones who would die would be them. No wonder they weren't afraid. Even though they had fewer people, they had such a trump card. "What is your goal for this bet?" A president couldn't help but ask. "To watch a flying man," Han Family Young Master said. The presidents were speechless. What kind of reason was that? "Are you going to bet or not? If not, then just jump," Han Family Young Master said. "What? Do I have to call people to throw it?" Han Family Young Master said. "Fuck, are you threatening us? Bosses, use your brains. If you aren't going to bet, then why are you all still here? Of course you all have to go out. If you want to go out, then what if you don't jump?" The presidents came back to their senses. The clock tower was blocked, and there was no way out. They didn't bring any scrolls, so they could only jump if they wanted to go out. "We can go to a lower place to jump." A president was very smart. Flying men," Han Family Young Master said. "A bunch of flying men," Han Family Young Master said. The presidents wiped off their sweat. They could already foresee that if they really jumped, then the story of the 26 flying men would be on the forum headlines tomorrow. Although the 26,000 spectators were all on the same side, they didn't care if they were close or not. But we will bet with you, let's see what tricks you all have up your sleeves. The presidents discussed for a while and finally agreed. They didn't have a choice. If they didn't agree, then they would die. If they didn't agree, then they would be flying men. What was more annoying was what would they do after they left? Continue to be surrounded by the 26,000 people here? Although the other party's bet was suspicious, it could at least let things continue to develop. No matter what changes there were, it was better than the current stalemate. At least everyone had something to do. Butterfly Knot, come out and watch the flying men. Chapter 953. From start to finish, the 26 guilds that were charging towards Cloud City hadn't taken the initiative to attack. From being led into the city by the Imperial Divine Cry, to being trapped in the tower, to being despised outside the tower, to being forced into the tower, to accepting the wager now, all of it was because he had no choice but to accept it. They were all guild leaders, so it was natural for them to be suppressed like this. After agreeing to the bet, one of the guild leaders said, "It's too lonely to fly alone. Why don't we do it this way? Whoever loses, everyone will fly down." This was to seize the initiative and suppress the other party. This was also the result of their discussion. Although they were very suspicious of the other party's conspiracy, the guild leaders still felt that they were in an invincible position in this bet, so they did not hesitate to increase the stakes. If the very overpowered player retreated, the guild leaders would be very happy. Who knew that the other party did not even think about it and casually agreed with a okay. The guild leaders who were originally quite confident, but when they saw the other party's nonchalant look, their hearts could not help but beat a small drum. While the guild leaders were bewildered, they made arrangements for the guild. The main point was to temporarily wait outside the tower, not to move, and not to cause trouble. Even if someone tried to cause trouble, it would be fine as long as they were repelled, especially not to start a conflict with the players of Cloud City. This was announced to all guild members. Then, the guild leaders each privately chatted with their core confidants, explaining the details of the situation, and left the outside matters to them to make arrangements. After everything was arranged, the guild leaders breathed a sigh of relief. What should they do next? The very overpowered player did not speak, and no one paid attention to them. There was even a group of people who gathered to play poker. In the beginning, there were only 3 people playing landlord, but in the end, it became 3 families with 6 people. Halfway through, there were even people who suddenly got up to say that they had something to do, and then left. Everything was so calm and natural, as if they were not surrounded by 26,000 strong players. Those who wanted to play, those who wanted to laugh, and those who wanted to look for girls continued to lean against the window to look for beauties. The guild leaders were bored. What were they doing? Some people subconsciously looked at the pile of alcohol at the stairs. Previously, they insisted on not accepting the enemy's sugar-coated bullets, but now they wanted to take the initiative to attack the sugar-coated bullets. Just like that, they did not know how long they had to endure. From loneliness, boredom, and worry, the guild leaders gradually became a little excited. Why? It was getting closer and closer to the appointed time. The presidents weren't fools. Of course, they would make an appointment. Otherwise, wouldn't there be no end to this? Did they really have to wait for their guild members to cause trouble? Wouldn't that mean that they had no chance of winning? At this time, there were only 10 minutes left before the bet ended. From the reports from the various guilds, everything was calm. There were no surprises. The players who had gathered in Cloud City to watch the game had also dispersed due to boredom. Only the 26,000 players from the 26 guilds were still gathered there like idiots. Everyone, hold on a little longer. It will be over soon. The various guild leaders comforted the crowd. They were also waiting, and they knew how difficult it was. 1 point, 2 points, 3 points. For the rest of the time, every minute that passed made the guild leaders feel very satisfied. They felt more and more like they could see the flying man perform. They began to size up the group of people who were very heaven-defying, thinking about what each of them would look like when they flew down. Suddenly, someone realized that a very heaven-defying person had left just now. Wouldn't it mean that they wouldn't need to fly if they left? This was against the rules. That was what everyone was thinking, but they actually allowed that person to leave without stopping him? This has to be made clear. Don't tell me these guys are trying to take advantage of this loophole and wait until the time is almost up to see if anything happens and they all leave first. A guild leader said. All the other guild leaders expressed their agreement. Just as they were about to speak, the Han family young master who had been leaning against the window and drinking suddenly sneered and said, "Finally can't sit still anymore?" Then he looked over at them. For some reason at this moment, all the guild leaders felt an inexplicable shock in their hearts. A feeling of being schemed against uncontrollably slid into their hearts. One of them had already blurted out, "What can't sit still anymore?" Just a moment ago, news of your guild members committing murder and arson came from a few streets in Cloud City. The Han family young master was full of smiles as he spoke alarmingly. Murder was one thing, but how could they set fire in the game? Do you want to burn down the main city? Did they really think that the system didn't exist? Impossible. The 26 guild leaders practically spoke in unison. They were constantly in contact with their guilds. Their brothers and sisters were doing their best to fulfill their duties. During this boring wait, not a single person from any guild left. That's the truth, the Han family young master said. The truth isn't up to you to make up. Our guild members are clearly below. A guild leader said. You're saying that our people are committing murder and arson. What evidence do you have? Another guild leader said. This evidence isn't easy to obtain. Why don't you send someone to take a look? The Han family young master said. The guild leaders looked at each other. Someone laughed coldly. Do you think we'll fall for this? We can choose a few people from each side of the tower to personally investigate. The Han family young master said. When the guild leaders heard this, they felt that this method was feasible. Thus, they randomly picked 2 out of the 26 people. They were both archers with good eyesight. On the side of Against the Heavens, the ones who stood out were Sword Demon and Brother Yu. The 4 of them will go take a look. Is that okay? The Han family young master said. After the guild leaders nodded, Brother Yu took out a teleportation scroll and the 4 of them entered the teleportation circle. When the teleportation scroll came out, they were naturally in the Cloud City outside the tower. The 2 guild leaders immediately looked around. In the end, this was just a normal market. There was nothing out of the ordinary. The 2 of them searched while asking, "Where?" "This way." Brother Yu led the way. The Sword Demon didn't say a word. One of the 2 found the Sword Demon and said, "Boss Sword Demon." The Sword Demon smiled and nodded. That person also smiled. "Long time no see." "That's right. You're still as famous as ever. You're not bad either." "Ha, Against the Heavens, you're awesome no matter where you go." Brother Yu and the other guild leader looked at the 2 of them in surprise. So they knew each other. Brother Yu couldn't help but be impressed. As expected of the Sword Demon, he also knew the guild leaders. It was just that he kept a low profile and didn't make it public. Compared to himself, Brother Yu only felt that it was very vulgar. This time, there's no right or wrong. You know, the guild leader said to the Sword Demon. You probably don't know how much we've been despised." "I know," the Sword Demon said. "You know. If I knew that guild was yours, I would have warned you," the Sword Demon said. "Warn me about what?" The guild leader was startled. "There's a hidden meaning to this." The Sword Demon smiled. The guild leader scratched his head, clearly not understanding. The other guild leader also had a face of suspicion. It looks like a natural conflict between the players, but in reality, someone has been instigating it from behind. The Sword Demon said, "You're talking about Ingchi Studio?" No one thought that the other guild leader would say it out loud. The Sword Demon and Brother Yu both looked towards him. If someone was instigating it from behind, the answer isn't hard to guess, right? The guild leader shrugged. From the start, it was Ingchi who hired these experts to do things, causing the situation to develop. The answer wasn't hard to guess. You suspected it from the start? Brother Yu asked this brother. The brother nodded. And I'm not the only one who thinks this way. But so what? We have no choice, even if we know that we're being schemed against. In the game, if you want to break up a guild, force is the most direct way, but it's never the most effective. The most terrifying thing is actually rumors and slander. If the people's hearts scatter, then the guild will collapse. So you guys have to fight this battle? Brother, you said. The brother nodded. Divert attention, quell rumors, shut people's mouths, and strengthen the cohesion of the guild. But if the studio wants to cause trouble, they can still continue to instigate and fabricate other rumors. Brother, you said. How can there be waves without wind? The brother laughed. Brother, you understood what he meant. For example, if their people weren't killed by defying Chi, even if the studio wanted to create rumors about them, they wouldn't be able to create such a big effect. What a talent! Brother Yu exclaimed in admiration. The sword demon and defying Chi also expressed their admiration. You're welcome. The brother was humble. Since it's like this, we can't let the studio succeed no matter what. Sword demon said. AI, it's easier said than done. The brother sighed. Brother Yu looked at the coordinates and suddenly said, We're almost there. Actually, what do you guys plan to do? The brother suddenly asked. Since everyone had communicated openly, he felt that it wasn't too much to ask this question. Lure the snake out of its hole. Sword demon said. Who's the snake? Who else could it be? So, now it's actually the studio's people pretending to be our guild to cause trouble in Cloud City? Talent, talent. Brother, you continued to worship. But even if we know these things, we can't explain it clearly. We're new faces in Cloud City. With such a fierce attack, the players in Cloud City may have been hostile to us for a long time. So we're prepared. Sword Demon said. Our bet is preparation. Sword Demon said. The people from our 26 guilds didn't move at all. The brothers' eyes lit up. But will the players in Cloud City believe us so easily? It may not be easy in other main cities, but Cloud City is different. There are experts with high enough reputation here. Qianli drunk. This time, it was finally the brothers' turn to worship. Sword Demon and Brother, you suddenly felt very proud to have such a friend. What about Qianli drunk? He's not online. The two were speechless. Such a big thing happened and he's not online? The two guild leaders stared with wide eyes. Sword Demon and Brother Yu were silent. At this moment, they felt that having such a friend, their emotions were complicated. Chapter 954. They finally arrived at the place Brother Yu led. The discussion about Qianli's drunkenness stopped for the time being. Brother Yu pointed in a certain direction and said, It's probably that team, right? In that direction, there was a team of players strutting around on the street. The studio wanted to stir up a storm in the city, but they couldn't just kill wherever they went. The problem of PK value had to be considered. They didn't dare to kill more than 30 to provoke the system god. In fact, many players didn't even dare to kill more than 20. It would be troublesome if they encountered a system guard or something like that. Therefore, the puppet army sent by the studio spent most of their time wandering around, taking the initiative to find trouble and cause trouble in crowded places. There was no point in finding a deserted street and killing people, right? At this time, this street was a block with no people. This team was actually not interested in the sporadic passing players and moved forward with a purpose. This made it convenient for Sword Demon and the others. The four of them casually moved forward. The two Archer Guild leaders didn't grow eagle eyes for nothing. One step ahead of Sword Demon and Brother Yu, they clearly saw the team's guild badge. They didn't know people from other guilds, but they knew each other's badges. After the two guild leaders looked at each other, the team had already approached and passed by the four of them. They're pretending to be the drunken battlefield guild of your 26 guilds, right? Brother Yu said. Both of them nodded their heads. Let's follow them from afar and see what they want to do, Brother Yu suggested. It would be too obvious to turn around and follow them, so the four of them went into an alley on the side. Sword Demon and Brother Yu, the two natives of Cloud City, were naturally very familiar with the layout of Cloud City's main city. At this time, they led the way, preparing to circle around and then appear behind the team. After a small circle, they were a little far from the team, but at least they could still see them. Brother Yu looked in the direction and said to the sword demon, "Looking at the direction, they're probably going to the tavern?" "It should be." Sword demon nodded. There were many taverns in a main city, and every tavern had many players resting in it. If you wanted to cause trouble, you couldn't miss out on such a place. The four of them sped up to catch up. From afar, they could see that the group of people had indeed entered the tavern. Before the four of them reached the tavern, Brother Yu had already received the news. "It's already started." "How did you receive so much information?" The president of that generation couldn't help but ask. "The players of all the guilds in Cloud City can be said to be our eyes. Everyone takes turns passing on information, and it will eventually reach us." As for places like taverns, there were people who arranged for us from the very beginning. "If you want to cause trouble to attract attention, these are the best places to do it," Brother Yu explained. "So that's how it is." The person nodded. As they spoke, they had already approached the tavern. They seemed to have heard the sounds of fighting inside. Not long after, the door was pushed open, and the group of people had already flashed out. They weren't running away, but arrogantly called out to the players in the tavern to come out and fight again. The players in the tavern were already scared out of their wits. A group of people flashed out and fought with the other party at the entrance of the tavern. After a few blows, half of them were killed. At this time, the spectators in the tavern hadn't even all left yet. This group of people is very strong. The eyes of the two presidents were naturally very sharp. Their equipment isn't simple. The four of them walked closer. They were already in the range of appraisal. Brother Yu had already started to examine them. "Damn, they're all exquisite." Brother Yu was shocked as he appraised. The two presidents were also examining the equipment of this group of people. They were indeed quite extraordinary. If not, how could they bully the players who weren't that far apart in level? Sword Demon was very angry. He pulled off the mask that was hanging on his neck and equipped his head. Then he held his dagger and rushed forward. Before Brother Yu could stop him, Sword Demon had already disappeared. He immediately used his ultimate skill, Misty Ambush. "Haha, I knew it." Brother Yu, Sword Demon's old subordinate, old comrade, and also the first president's sharpshooter, didn't hesitate. He took out his bow from his pocket and shot an arrow. Man, a real man. The talent president also took out his weapon. This way, Brother Yu, who initially wanted to stop Sword Demon, didn't seem very manly. Brother Yu explained gloomily, "I'm not trying to stop him. I mean, at least wait until I'm in my state. Just give it to us and then you can run first." The two guild leaders laughed, and each of them released an arrow. "Why are we running?" Brother Yu asked as he buffed the two of them. "This group of people isn't simple. We can probably sneak attack and kill one or two of them. After that, we have to run. The three of us are fine. If you don't run first, you're dead." Brother Yu didn't hesitate. He didn't have a sense of presence when his teammates showed off their strength. He was already used to it. He immediately retreated and shouted, "Then, I'll wait for you in front. Go, go." The two archers waved their hands. On the other side, Sword Demon had already rushed into the enemy's formation. With just one slash, his valiant figure had already attracted the attention of the team. Everyone turned their heads to look. The two archer president's quick arrows had already flown over and firmly hit the player who was stabbed by Sword Demon. The two presidents' damage was obviously not bad. Sword Demon's target naturally wasn't those who had thick skin and could endure being killed. With an abnormal fog ambush and the sharp sniping of the two presidents, the player who was attacked had already died before he could be rescued. "Cool!" The group of players who were being bullied cried out. They had already realized that they were no match for their opponent. However, the battle had already reached a point where they couldn't escape even if they wanted to. Who knew that a savior would suddenly appear and kill an enemy that they were completely no match for? Everyone's spirits were lifted. "What are you looking at? Let's go together and destroy this group of troublemakers." Sword Demon roared at the Cloud City players who were watching the show. These players who had come out of the tavern had already seen how this group of people came in looking for trouble. At this moment, Sword Demon's bold and unrestrained actions instantly ignited many people's fighting spirit. Do it! Half of the spectators immediately gave up on being numb. Whether they were high-level or low-level, experts or noobs, they took out their weapons and threw their most convenient skills at the group of people. It had to be said that this group of people was worthy of being the studio's elite fighters. At this moment, after being fully armed, there was no sign of chaos even though they were outnumbered. In fact, before they came to this task, they were already mentally prepared for this kind of situation. Who knew where they would incite a player uprising? Fuck, awesome, too awesome. The two presidents saw that Sword Demon had instantly incited the spectators, and their spirits were lifted as well. Whoosh 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 whoosh, they continued to release cold arrows. Don't panic. Warriors, cover the mages. Focus fire. Archers, pay attention to focus fire. Priests, give me 2 priests to heal me. Bandits, don't talk if you're in stealth mode. People will hear you. Melee fighters, take turns to attack. Don't fight. If your health is low, retreat. Sword Demon fought while commanding these ragtag troops to fight to the death with the puppet army. Both sides fought back and forth in front of the tavern. After all, the strength of the side of Cloud City was limited. They weren't as well-equipped and coordinated as the puppet army. In the fierce battle, there were constantly people falling under the white light. However, this battle was obviously no longer a battle that belonged to one person. The players who stood up first fell, and soon, new players who were provoked to fight rushed up. Under the call of Sword Demon, this was a rare battle where there were no spectators because all the spectators would soon become participants in the battle. Gradually, the puppet soldiers began to feel afraid. At this time, it wasn't just the players who were provoked in the tavern. Those who passed by on the street and stopped to watch would quickly throw their weapons into the battle. At first, the puppet army was worried that if they continued fighting like this, their PK value would rise to 30 and they would be crushed by the system guards. However, it seemed like they didn't have that chance anymore. Attacks came from all directions, and they gradually felt that they couldn't take care of them all. The faces of the priests in the team became darker and darker. Priests were the most aware of the pressure of the battle. The busier the priests were, the more disadvantageous the situation was. The two priests in the team took turns to control and recover the damage so that one of them would always have time to recover their mana. However, facing more and more attacks, the two of them couldn't take care of each other even if they worked together. We can't take it anymore. We have to retreat. We can't hold on any longer, the two priests said hurriedly. If this continued, they would definitely die if they ran out of mana. It seems like it's too late. The face of the leader of the team was ashen. Everyone looked around and couldn't find a way out at all. It was full of people. Quick, drop your equipment. Someone suddenly reminded. Everyone came to a realization. Now that they were all wearing exquisite equipment and had PK value, if they fell, their equipment would definitely drop. With this thought, everyone stopped resisting and started to put their equipment into their pockets in unison. The players who were in the midst of killing saw their opponents suddenly doing this, and they immediately looked down on them. Useless. Too useless. Now you know fear. Do it, don't let them take the equipment. All sorts of shouts were mixed in. Sword Demon didn't need to make any noise at this time. Even if he shouted, no one would listen. The players surged forward and instantly slashed the people who were looting their equipment into white light. These people were already very efficient in collecting the equipment, but there were still a few pieces of equipment. Moreover, with so many people surrounding them, the attacks never stopped. A few people died before they could remove all the equipment. The equipment dropped all over the ground, but miraculously, no one went to pick it up. The players on the front line looked at each other and suddenly cheered. Awesome, this is awesome. Kill this bunch of trash. The players cheered. After shouting for a few seconds, someone finally shouted, pick up the equipment. The scene instantly became chaotic again. Sword Demon awkwardly squeezed out of the sea of people, but his face was full of an excited smile. Chapter 955. Outside the crowd, the two Archer Guild leaders also gave a thumbs up to Sword Demon. Both of them admired Sword Demon very much. Some people were born with the temperament of a boss. Even if they were usually quiet and inconspicuous, they would be able to attract attention as long as they stood out when needed. They would be able to make people involuntarily listen to them and follow their orders. What kind of aura was this? No one could say for sure, but according to his old friend, Sword Ghost, this was the temperament that he had unconsciously cultivated after being the boss of countless online games. Brother Yu had already rushed back at this time. He didn't run but found a place to hide. In the end, he also witnessed the scene of Sword Demon launching the People's War and forcibly surrounding the team of strong players. Brother Yu's blood was boiling just by watching, and at this time, he ran back with a thumbs up. Bull. Giant bull. Other than this word, the three guys couldn't find another more appropriate adjective. Let's not talk anymore. Call people and get rid of this bunch of trash. At this time, the guild leader recalled the scene of Sword Demon commanding the players to destroy the team. His heart itched and he wanted to immediately bring his brothers to do the same. No, you guys can't move. Sword Demon said. Why? If you guys move, it will be chaotic and it will be hard to distinguish between friend and foe. Not to mention our Cloud City players, I think even if your 26 guilds had such a group of people mixed in, you guys wouldn't be able to tell the real from the fake, right? Sword Demon said. Is there any accurate information that impersonates our two guilds? We want to see it with our own eyes. Sword Demon's old comrade said at this time. Of course. Brother Yu looked at the information and waved his hand. Over here. News of the annihilation of a group of puppet soldiers quickly reached the ears of the bosses of the workshops. Naturally, the boss of the puppet army was livid and depressed, especially when he found out that they had lost a lot of equipment due to PvP when they died. He wanted to kick everyone he saw. Although this loss wasn't as tragic as Ing Chi's warehouse being robbed, it was still meat no matter how few flies there were. Moreover, they were all top-notch equipment. It was indeed a little painful. All the bosses asked about the battle situation in detail and learned that a large group of players had ganged up on them. All the bosses thought that their provocation was too aggressive, so much so that they angered the public. But then they heard the news that someone suspected to be the Sword Demon had appeared. Sword Demon's eye-catching performance at the time was noticed by everyone present. The puppet army would not have come to the conclusion that the Sword Demon was the thief that they saw. However, the damage from the Sword Demon's misty ambush was too outstanding. The puppet army did not dare to believe that the thief was the Sword Demon. The information that the puppet army sent back said that it was the Sword Demon, but they did not dare to confirm it. In the end, this news made all the bosses excited. In their eyes, it was very overpowered. They had already begun to incite the players of Sword Demon to fight back. This was a very good sign. All teams should be more cautious. Since the opponent has begun to consciously fight back, although our teams are elites, it will still be difficult to deal with them. Don't pick places that are too eye-catching, Matchless Wonder said. All the bosses nodded and made adjustments to their strategies. The purpose of picking places with a lot of people to cause trouble was to make the players of Cloud City react quickly. Now it seemed that the effect was achieved. The fire had been successfully lit. Next, it was time for the real 26th Division to clash with the players of Cloud City. Their puppet army just needed to add fuel to the fire from time to time. Boss Ya, isn't it time for your people to make a move? Matchless Wonder said. Nitrite was quite helpless. In fact, his side was much more difficult. Those people who caused trouble everywhere were bullying the civilians of Cloud City. If they were unlucky enough to run into the Sword Demon, they would be able to organize an effective resistance. As for his side, if he wanted to provoke them, he would have to go to the 26th Guild. They had 26,000 combat troops ready at any time. His team was very overpowered, and this mission was very likely to end in his death. Matchless Wonder purposely gave him such a task, but Nitrite had no choice but to accept it. It could be said that he was being played. Outside the clock tower, the players of the 26th Guild were still quietly waiting for orders. Suddenly, the players discovered that there were very sneaky players appearing in a certain alley. The players who had been lonely for a long time were not angry. They excitedly wanted to catch them, but they were stopped by the guild leaders. The core person who maintained the situation quickly reported the situation to the guild leaders who were still in the clock tower. What were the guild leaders doing? They had just received news from the two guild leaders who went out to see what was going on. They were in a tense discussion. Many of the guild leaders were willing to accept the idea that the studios were playing tricks. But at this moment, were these guys pretending to be the studios using this as a pretext? Or were they using a very overpowered method to incite the players of Cloud City to resist them? The guild leaders were still discussing incessantly. Even when they heard that the opponents had been annihilated by the Sword Demon's Cloud City players, they still suspected that this might be an act. They started to lure us here, then lure us into the clock tower and find an excuse to stall for time. Then they used this method to mobilize all the players of Cloud City to surround us here? A terrifying conspiracy that sounded quite frightening was discussed by the guild leaders. At this moment, someone outside the clock tower reported that there were sneaky players with bad intentions nearby. There was already a guild leader who stood up and wanted to take out his weapon and fight to the death with these very overpowered people. In the end, it was Han family young master who glanced at this person in surprise. What's the situation? We've already seen through your trick of injuring yourself to gain confidence. This person laughed coldly. Are you crazy? Are you nervous because you know you're going to be a flying man? Han family young master said. This guild leader's warrior was about to charge over. A warrior beside the young master of the Han clan immediately moved to block as well. The two of them collided and both of them were forced back several steps. The two sides immediately entered a state of battle. In the narrow space inside the tower, both sides had already set up their respective formations. The battle was about to break out at any moment. Han family young master's voice was the first to be heard. Speak clearly before you make your move. Don't listen to his nonsense, it's all to stall for time. A mage on the guild leader's side raised his hand and blasted down a spell. The space inside the clock tower was small. This spell only had half of the effect. Half of it was on the overpowered people and the other half was on the wall. No matter how strong the overpowered people were, space was limited. If they wanted to dodge the spell, they would have to jump off the building. In the flames, Han family young master cast a few healing spells on Yutian Shenming and the others who had low health. Those who were attacked looked at their health. The guild leader of a big guild was indeed extraordinary. With this kind of attack power, other than Chenli Drunk, there was probably no other mage in Cloud City that was as strong. After this attack, words didn't need to be said. The space inside the tower was small. The front line of melee classes had already collided with each other when they took 2 steps forward. Ping ping pang pang pang. Classes like thieves had all become warriors. What was there to sneak around? In such a small place, there was no space for people to take a detour and ambush. Archers were even more pitiful. There was no space to shoot at all. Even mages had to be careful. The space was narrow. If they didn't throw their spells accurately, they would hit their own people. As for single-target spells, apart from lightning spells that fell from the sky, other spells were the same as archers. There was no space to fly. Both sides had a lot of people who didn't have a place to use their skills. The damage output of the battle was greatly limited. This fight didn't have any technical content. It was like pushing a wall. The 2 rows of melee classes in the middle were fighting. The Blazing Cloak was very powerful at this moment. His Fire Beacon City skill was something that even the enemy guild leader didn't know. After he threw it out twice, the 2 rows of fire walls roasted the guild leaders. They couldn't even dodge. There was no coordination, no tactics, and no technique in this battle. It was just a battle of attrition. Whoever could last longer would be closer to victory. In this kind of situation, priests were obviously very important. There were naturally priests among the guild leaders, but they couldn't do much at this moment because the fire 3,000 layers flames kept burning under their feet. This spell was continuously losing health. Priests' healing spells were the same as mages' spells. They could be interrupted by attacks, so they were greatly affected. Even so, The guild leaders felt that they had more people. In the end, they should be the ones to last until the end. The other side didn't teleport any reinforcements. It seemed like they didn't make any arrangements in this area. Just as they were feeling proud, they suddenly realized that the melee class experts in front of them were flashing with white light. They were clearly being healed by the priests. Their healing wasn't good, but the other side's healing was so smooth. The guild leaders who were fighting panicked. They looked behind them and spat out a mouthful of blood. The three priests in the enemy's formation were all sitting by the window under the leadership of the Han family's young master. Their feet were not touching the ground, and the 1,000 layers of flame could not burn them at all. How could their healing spells not be smooth? The guild leaders looked back again. There was no such terrain behind them. Their special choice was to roll down the stairs. The guild leaders couldn't help but spit out blood. The other side's priests were sitting comfortably in the window. They were probably prepared for this, right? No wonder they didn't call for help. They had the confidence to win. Many guild leaders regretted making a move so hastily. It seemed like they were going to die for sure. But on second thought, if they didn't make a move now, the other side's plot would be carried out. They would also die in the clock tower. Wouldn't it be the same if they died earlier or later? Once they thought of this, the guild leaders' hearts suddenly relaxed, and each of them took on the stance of risking their lives. In the end, he heard the young master of the Han clan, who was sitting leisurely in the window, say, "If you really want to die so badly, then die. Leave a few alive to play with the flying man." The guild leaders heard this. There was a hidden meaning in this. There seemed to be a pause. Suddenly, someone shouted, "All of you, stop." The guild leaders all stopped. Even if they took a few hits for nothing, they wouldn't die immediately. They were all experts with high attack and endurance. Chapter 956. After all, the guild leaders were unfamiliar with each other. This caused them to have a lack of teamwork. They could talk things out, but this was a battle that was constantly changing. They really didn't have the time. At this time, everyone stopped fighting in unison, but after they stopped, their reactions were different. For example, some of the priest guild leaders didn't move, while others took the opportunity when the enemy's mage stopped attacking to heal. Don't move. That damn priest, I'm talking to you, you're still healing." Han family young master pointed at someone and shouted, "You haven't had enough, right? Do you still want to continue?" As he said that, Han family young master's hands were also furiously healing. This couldn't be helped. If the enemy didn't heal you and the enemy suddenly attacked again, you would be at a disadvantage. Both sides looked at each other. This was like pulling one hair and the whole body would be affected. In the blink of an eye, it seemed like they were going to fight again. At this moment, someone among the guild leaders shouted, "Everyone stop. Everyone look at the message. There's a new situation." Some of the guild leaders were preparing to fight, some were working hard to heal, and the one who didn't stop after being scolded by Han family young master and instead encouraged the other priest guild leaders to work harder were all stunned. They all opened the team channel that their guild leaders had set up. The new situation was sent back by the frontline members of the dispatch tower. These two guild leaders, one was called Zhao Yin, an old friend of Sword Demon. The other was called Cloud Rising Mountain, the calm and objective guild leader. The message was sent by Cloud Rising Mountain. According to Zhao Yin's instructions, Brother Yu asked about the location of their guilds. In the end, Cloud Rising Mountain's guild was slightly closer, so he headed over there. Cloud Rising Mountain's guild had the same name as him, and was also called Cloud Rising Mountain. The puppet army that was disguised as them had already followed the orders of the higher-ups and found a secluded street. They didn't notice that their whereabouts were being noticed, and no one followed them along the way. Of course, they wouldn't be followed, because there was no need to. Almost all of the guild players in Cloud Peak City were incredibly overpowered informants. Wherever they went, no one was following them. This was because the players next to them were reporting their whereabouts to their guild leaders. Their guild leaders also had their own channels to inform others about this. It was incredibly overpowered. The four of them accurately came to the door. This area was quite remote, and there were very few players passing by. This time, they didn't dare to provoke this group of people. The four of them pretended to be players passing by and casually walked forward. As they drew closer and closer, Cloud Rising Mountains became more and more confused as he stared at this group of puppet soldiers. These people, what? They're just like the brothers in my guild. Since they were wearing the same equipment, their appearances weren't all that different. From afar, Cloud Rising Faraway Mountains could tell that this group of players looked like his guild's trusted aides. When he got closer and used appraisal on them, he discovered that they were practically replicas. Aside from their appearances, they could pass off as real. Previously, the puppet soldiers weren't pretending to be Zhao Yin and Cloud Rising Mountains Guild, so they only thought that their equipment was good. However, now that Cloud Rising Mountains saw this group of people pretending to be his guild members, he could immediately tell that their equipment was good. At this moment, he quickly relayed the news to the other guild leaders in the team chat. This news came at the right time. If it wasn't for this information, there would have been another fight in the clock tower. Deliberately pretending to be their guild's experts was different from pretending to be their guild's experts and pretending to be their guild's experts. Deliberately pretending to be their experts meant that they had to invest in them. There were 26 level 6 guilds here, so how could the equipment of their experts be cheap? Even if each guild only sent out 10 people, it would still be 260 sets of top-tier equipment. Even a player with money wouldn't go so far. Moreover, with so many different top-tier equipment, it would take a lot of effort and time to collect them all. Even if you had money, you might not be able to do it. Even if a workshop had it, it was still a rare commodity. It wasn't something that could be sold with money. For a workshop, these two steps couldn't be any easier. The equipment was in their inventory, so taking it out for temporary use was a small matter. This time, the various guild leaders finally dispelled their suspicions. This wasn't a deliberate misdirection, and the previous annihilation of a team wasn't a ruse. This was indeed the work of the workshop behind the scenes, trying to provoke a conflict between the 26 guilds and the players of Cloud City. Han Family Young Master and the others had naturally received the news. Seeing that the other guild leaders had no intention of fighting, they naturally wouldn't take the initiative to attack. What are those people from the workshop trying to do? One guild leader couldn't help but roar. They had a faint feeling that they were being manipulated from behind the scenes. This feeling was very unpleasant. Where are these imposters hiding? Drag them out and take care of them. Another guild leader shouted. After saying this, the other guild leaders looked towards against the heavens. Clearly, they knew the movements of these people. Leave the matter of these imposters to us. What all of you need to do is make sure your subordinates don't run around. At a time like this, most of you probably can't even tell the difference between the real and the fake. Han Family Young Master finally jumped out from the window and said, "As for the bet just now." Han Family Young Master's sudden mention of this shocked the other guild leaders. However, someone quickly reacted and said, "We didn't lose the bet. Those guys are imposters. They aren't from our guild. Our people are all here." "Oh, so Zhao Yin and Cloud Rising Mountain aren't people?" Han Family Young Master asked. "Fuck, that counts." The other guild leaders wanted to vomit blood. "Doesn't count? Then it doesn't count. Guild leaders, please keep your subordinates in check. Leave the rest to us," Han Family Young Master said. Then, against the heavens, took out their scrolls. In a group of 4, they quickly ran out of scrolls. That guy didn't take the bet seriously? The guild leaders were in disbelief. Although it was their first time meeting him, they had already seen how evil he was. They couldn't believe this was real. Although they understood the purpose of the bet, it was to stall for time, but it wasn't to deal with them. It was to make the people from the gaming studio take action. It was to let the guild leaders see the truth. Now, the truth was clear. Due to the gorgeous cosplay, there was no other force in the game other than the gaming studio that had the ability to do such a thing. Compared to the reason why they were bought to deal with the heaven-defying incident, it was not difficult to see the role of the gaming studio in this matter. However, the problem was, even if they understood, the rumors in their main city wouldn't be quelled immediately. If they wanted to quell the rumors, they would have to get back at against the heavens. But now, the guild leaders were at a loss. Suddenly, another guild leader said with a miserable expression, "Brothers, how are we going to get out?" Get out? Fuck, how are we going to get out? The guild leaders were going crazy. Weren't they trapped in the clock tower? Looking from the inside, there were countless layers of stones blocking the door. It seemed like Against the Heavens had spent most of his time collecting these stones to decorate the clock tower. At this time, the flying man was their only choice to get out of the tower. Flying? Someone asked. Flying 6. Someone raged. That bastard. The guild leaders wanted to cry. When the Han family's young master and the others teleported out of the city, they gathered in one place, which was the central plaza of Cloud City. Quite a few players had been waiting for them there, led by Unsworn Sword. This was Cloud City's elite guild. Seeing that the Han clan's young master and the others had arrived, Unsworn Sword quickly came forward and asked directly, "Can we make our move now?" "You're in a hurry?" Han family young master laughed. Sword Without Oath's eyes were filled with greed. "You're lucky this time. You'll have to kill many bosses to get the equipment yourself," Han family young master said. "Haha, I'm going to rip them all off this time." Sword Without Oath laughed. Not far behind Sword of No Oath, the Han family's young master saw a person. He was once a high-spirited guild leader, but his old leader went against the flow and stood there, looking a little uneasy. Guild leader against the current. Han family young master, who had always been arrogant, actually took the initiative to greet someone. After that war, Against the Current's days weren't good. The guild that was once in the limelight collapsed. More than half of their brothers were gone. They were depressed and had less time to play the game. There was no one to take care of wine when Songs and Black Alliance and Sheepcloud Guild were even worse off than Black Alliance and Sheepcloud Guild. Unsworn Sword, who used to grit his teeth whenever he saw him, was now sincerely addressing him as a brother. However, Upstream was not happy because of this, because he knew that in the eyes of Unsworn Sword, he was no longer a big shot who could compete with him. Unsworn Sword, Against the Current, was starting to hate this person more and more. However, although Against the Current had fallen, Sword Without Oath's unhindered wouldn't be able to take over Cloud City. Although the guild was small, in the hearts of Cloud City players, it was already the #1 guild in Cloud City. At the thought of this, Against the Heavens' ascension felt a little better. A lot of his dissatisfaction with Very Defiant had been diluted by Unsworn Sword and reigning the 4 seas. At this time, Han family young master, the person who made him so angry when he left, actually took the initiative to greet him when he was in such dire straits. Against the Current suddenly felt warmth in his heart. In terms of arrogance, this person was even more arrogant than Qianli. However, his attitude towards Against the Current wasn't like most people who fawned on the rich and powerful. Chapter 957. Even though singing to wine had failed, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. Their skill level was still above average. After young Master Han greeted Against the Current, he didn't say anything else. He only said, "Bring more people?" Against the Current nodded and looked behind him. Even though the guild was no longer in its prime, there were still many brothers who stayed behind. Now, Upstream could finally call out everyone's names. Looking at Shan Xiling and the others behind him, Upstream suddenly felt that he wasn't that pitiful after all. Everything that happened in the past wasn't that big of a deal. "Alright, let's go." Against the Current was suddenly filled with fighting spirit and called out to the brothers who had never left him. "Okay." Everyone answered and left the central plaza with Against the Current. Unhindered 4 seas, Rosy Clouds, Mustering Clouds, and the other guilds were already on standby. After giving out their orders, they all left the central plaza. Not long after, the previously bustling central plaza became empty. Should we find a place to have some fun? At this time, the ones left in the plaza were very overpowered experts who were supposed to be the main characters. Of course, Han family young master had already walked out like a boss. This operation needed to be fast, accurate, and ruthless. Under the leadership of very overpowered, the guilds in Cloud City could barely be considered to be on the same side. First of all, Gu Fei's free leveling method had caused all the players in the city to have a good impression of Qianli and very overpowered. In fact, there were so many players who were jealous of very overpowered, so there was nothing bad about it. Many people were even fighting to join them. Furthermore, Unhindered, the most powerful guild in Cloud City, and Against Heaven's Will were growing closer and closer. Between Rosy Cloud and Against Heaven's Will, the second largest guild in Cloud City, they had never shown any enmity towards Against Heaven's Will. In fact, they were more than willing to lend a helping hand. With the help of these two guilds with deep foundations, the plan would naturally go smoothly. The other guilds, like Black Alliance and Sheepcloud Guild, who had a direct conflict with them, or those like Singing to Wine, who were indirectly unlucky, might be angry, but they didn't dare to openly challenge Very Defiant. Moreover, they weren't in the right. They were the ones who initiated the trouble first, but they were beaten down by the other party. To put it bluntly, they deserved this outcome. Of course, the people involved generally wouldn't think that way. They had to find someone to push the blame onto. Of course, the heaven-defying person who had beaten them to the ground was one of the targets of their anger. Ingqi's studio was the best choice. Wasn't it Ingqi's studio that urged them to provoke the heavens? In the end, they didn't get any benefits and ended up like this. After that, Ingqi's studio didn't say anything to comfort them. How could they not be hated? Now that there was an opportunity to bite back, how could he miss it? Although they all had different thoughts, they still reluctantly gathered together. In addition, equipment could be dropped if the workshop was destroyed, which was a very tempting benefit. The workshop and the 26 guilds thought that the players of Cloud City weren't prepared, but they were completely wrong. It wasn't that the players of Cloud City weren't prepared. In fact, the entire city was prepared, the largest scale of preparation. It was just that from the start, their target wasn't the 26 guilds, but the workshops. The workshops that were hiding behind the scenes, waiting to get rich. From the moment these people stepped onto the land of Cloud City, they had already stepped into Very Defiant's purposeful lead. They were waiting for this moment, the moment when the workshops would come out of the water. Although the strength of the players couldn't destroy the workshops, they had to at least let the workshops know that the players weren't idiots, they weren't puppets that could be manipulated at will. The guilds that scattered out from the central square all had their own destinations. The stronger ones split into two groups, the weaker ones formed groups of 3 to 5. In short, they all stared at the fake army in front of them. Kill the workshop. Drop the equipment. When the puppet troops vaguely heard such shouts, they suddenly realized that the secluded place they were originally at had become very lively. The players swarmed in from all directions, not giving them any chance to break out of the encirclement. On the roofs, in the streets, and at the entrance of the alley, there were people everywhere. The badges and equipment that they used to disguise themselves happened to be a clear target. Seeing such good equipment, all the players' eyes turned red. How should they distribute the equipment? This question was very important in the eyes of the players, and in the eyes of Very Defiant. Yes, it was also very important, but for the plan, it wasn't the key. Therefore, Han family young master didn't even think about it, nor did he mention it. The players could do whatever they wanted. Therefore, the attitude that the players showed toward these equipment was really one word: love. For the players who carried these equipment, there was only one word: kill. Like a pack of wolves preying on their prey, many of the puppet soldiers were scared silly. At that moment, they suddenly understood what kind of life the system bosses lived in the game. How could mere players like them, who were made of flesh and blood, endure that kind of unbearable passion? Under the intensive attack, people kept falling. There were no fake army members, but there were also many who were mistakenly killed by their own passion. Among these fake army members, other than the clerics, which one of them didn't have PK value? Some of them didn't even have low PK value. As soon as they died, the sound of equipment dropping and falling to the ground rang out. The players rushed forward to snatch the equipment, trampling many of them to death. The far-sighted guild leader had already made arrangements at the revival point, but these guys from the workshops were too cunning. Some of them didn't even register in the Cloud City. At this moment, when they were registered, they realized that the situation was very bad. The first thing they did after reviving at the revival point was to check the equipment. After that, they kept the equipment and reported the situation to the boss. What? What did you say? One by one, the bosses of the workshops jumped up and roared. There was a time when they were killed, but the difference was not too big. The bosses who were immediately alerted wanted to give orders, but it was already too late. With the Cloud City on full alert, no one would be able to escape. The bosses' faces were ashen. Putting aside the loss of equipment, this situation was very likely to prove that their operation had failed, completely failed. The opponent's attack was so accurate, it was unknown how long they had been holding back before exploding. They thought that they were controlling the situation, but now they realized that they were just going with the flow, walking step by step towards the vortex that was destroying them. What should we do now? A boss looked coldly at Unparalleled Wonder. Unparalleled Wonder didn't have time to reply, because he had just received the news that his subordinates had encountered the enemy. However, it just so happened that the person he met was a very heaven-defying person. Take them down. Unparalleled Wonder's orders sounded a little irrational, but since he had already asked about the situation, he knew that it was definitely possible. In the southwest corner of the Cloud City, in a desolate and dilapidated red clay street, Sword Demon's brother Yu met up with Han family young master and the others, and finally encountered their opponent. Forever led half of his eagle group to lie in ambush here. After discovering their opponent, he didn't panic like the other puppet troops. This was because their opponent didn't pounce on them like the other wolves. It was a very overpowered elite team, but the number of people that came was not much more than his eagle group. This wasn't an encirclement with numbers, but a fair fight. See, enemies are bound to meet on a narrow road. Han family young master said. You did it on purpose, right? Forever didn't believe that this was a coincidence. That's right. Do you want to settle this? Forever said. You want to settle this just by dying? You're too naive. Han family young master said. We don't know who will die yet. Cut the crap, let's go. Yun Zhongmu was getting impatient. He also hated Forever, and wanted nothing more than to go up and stab him 100 times. However, before they could rush up, Forever had already led his team and started to retreat. Where do you think you can run to? Han family young master laughed coldly. Unparalleled Wonder's team had already started to chase after him. Although everyone added points to their speed at different times, in a team battle like this, they all maintained a balanced movement speed. However, as the pursuers, Yu Tianxinming and the other archers were a few steps faster, continuously shooting arrows. Eagle Group also cooperated well, and their formation didn't get messed up as they ran. The archers and mages even retreated to the back of the team, occasionally turning around to attack, and spreading flames on the ground to obstruct the enemy. Unfortunately, the damage of the 1,000 layers flames of the cinder tree was nothing to these experts. They didn't even look and directly chased after him. However, there wasn't much of a difference in speed between the two sides. Unparalleled Wonder could only close in, and couldn't catch up in one go. Just as the members of the Eagle Party were about to rush out of the alley, another group of players rushed out of the street and blocked the exit. Idiot, do you really think we'll fight you one-on-one? Han family young master laughed coldly. Although Yun Xiang's Unparalleled Wonder wasn't a powerful expert, it wouldn't be a problem for them to stop the 15 Eagle Group. Eagle Group also stopped. Forever laughed. Do you think we're afraid of you? As he spoke, he pointed his sword at them, and the Eagle Group actually turned around and started to counterattack. Good. If it wasn't for the fact that he knew the enemy's strength, Cloud Midnight would have already charged into the enemy's formation. He had been chasing after them for so long, and now that the enemy had finally stopped, he roared and was the first to charge forward. The Han family's young master frowned. If they weren't afraid, then they wouldn't have had to waste so much time running so far. They could have just fought with them earlier to break out of the encirclement. Running this distance would instead allow the heaven-defying reinforcements to arrive. Wasn't that an unnecessary move? Could it be that this guy is also stalling for time to wait for reinforcements? Han family young master was shocked. Suddenly, a person flew down from the roof. Yun Zhongmu, who was charging forward, was completely unaware that he suddenly heard a loud shout from above his head. When he raised his head to look, he saw that the newcomer's claw had already grabbed his head. His body spun in the air, and Yun Zhongmu only felt that the force he was charging forward with suddenly lost control. His entire body unexpectedly spun and flew horizontally before falling to the ground. The person pulled out a dagger from his waist and immediately slashed at Cloud Midnight's neck. Cloud Morning yelled, "Who's there?" "Chinchi." Everyone heard this person's reply very clearly. Yun Zhongmu also saw that this person was an assassin. Like most assassins, his face was covered with a mask. At this moment, his eyes were fixed on the area he was about to stab. He was very focused and very serious. The dagger and the white light fell at almost the same time. Cloud Twilight thought he was going to die, but he shouldn't have thought that way. It was just a normal attack without any skills. Even the strongest normal attack, Thin Waist Dance, wouldn't be able to kill him in one hit. But in front of this person, Cloud Twilight felt that it wasn't a problem with this attack. Instead, it was a problem that he had no chance of winning against this person. This was because this person's ordinary attack was so professional. He couldn't die in the first place, and with his recovery skills, Cloud Midnight was obviously still alive. Then he heard the sound of a bow. This side had already received reinforcements. Yutian Shenming and Glue each shot an arrow at the enemy. Chen Qi had no choice but to dodge. He jumped backwards and dodged the two arrows. He finally left Cloud Midnight. Sword Demon had already rushed out. He used Misty Ambush and attacked Chen Qi like lightning, kicking up a trail of dust. However, Chen Qi didn't panic. His body bounced again, and he actually jumped towards the wall. He ran 2 steps across the wall. Sword Demon was shocked. He had predicted all the possible movements of this person, but he didn't expect him to run to the wall like this. This kind of running couldn't last long, but the problem was that his Misty Ambush was too fast. The opponent had only run 2 steps on the wall, and he had already passed by. He didn't even have time to raise his dagger and stab at the guy who was flying on the wall. Sword Demon didn't have time to react, but the opponent attacked. His left elbow unexpectedly moved outwards and accurately hit Sword Demon's head. The other party didn't run to the wall just to dodge, but to attack. With the speed of the Misty Shadow's sneak attack, this person was actually able to accurately attack. Just based on this, everyone could already tell that this person had a great background. Sword Demon received the accurate elbow attack from the side. Although it was a high-level skill, it was interrupted, and he staggered to the side. Chen Qi jumped off the wall, and when he passed by Sword Demon, he slashed at Sword Demon. A white light of recovery fell on Sword Demon just in time. Cloud Midnight had already gotten up, and he rushed over with his dagger. Chen Qi casually waved his hand and blocked Cloud Midnight's attack. Then he punched Sword Demon's face. Of course, these punches didn't deal much damage, but the scene was ugly enough. Sword Ghost and Cloud Morning were absolute PvP experts, but they couldn't do anything to this person. They were beaten left and right, and if it weren't for the priest heals supporting them from behind, the two of them would have fallen to the ground. It's an expert like Qianli. Everyone could see that this person was a professional like Gu Fei. Chapter 958. How strong was an expert like Gu Fei? Normal players would only have a vague impression of him, but very overpowered players had a clear understanding of him. Seeing Chen Qi's skills, everyone knew that they were in big trouble. Usually, they were the ones who teamed up and brought along such an abnormal expert to bully others, creating some impossible situations where they were outnumbered. But today, retribution finally fell on their heads. Their opponent actually brought along such an abnormal expert. Everyone shuddered at the thought of their former opponents being bullied to such a miserable state. Especially Wandering Sword's group of 7. They had been bullied like this before. Who would have thought that they would still have to go through such an experience after being in a group with these people? Was this fate? While Wandering Sword's group of 7 was lamenting about their bitter fate, Sword Demon and Cloud Twilight had already retreated, wanting to return to their team. Chen Qi's skills were clearly faster than Qianli's. Sword Demon and Cloud Twilight had used all their strength but couldn't even touch the corner of his clothes. The two of them were disheartened. They knew that fighting with this person was a waste of their cleric's mana. They hurriedly wanted to return to their team and use their strength. They weren't the only ones who had a team. Forever had already led the Eagle group over. Yun Xiang had brought many people to block the exit. They were still far away and didn't see what was going on. They only saw the group of people rush over and get blocked by them. They thought that their mission was complete, but they suddenly received a message telling them to hurry up and provide support. Yun Xiang didn't know what had happened either. She hurriedly ordered her people to rush into the alley, but the Eagle group and very overpowered players were already fighting. The overall strength of both sides was about the same. The Eagle group had the advantage in terms of teamwork. Very overpowered players had a higher level of skill, but who could be stronger than Chen Qi? The addition of this person had completely turned the situation around. Very overpowered was in a very passive position. Chen Qi's attack power wasn't low. After all, he was a studio. Even if he didn't have good equipment before, he would definitely be fully equipped now. Fortunately, at the end of the day, his top-tier equipment was only average. He wasn't as overpowered as Night Streak or Dancing Wind. He also didn't have a skill like Haze Ambush, which was heaven-defying. That was the only reason why no one had fallen so far. However, the cleric was under a lot of pressure. The Han family young master was no longer as relaxed as he was in the past. All his attention was focused on dealing with Chen Qi's attacks. He did not even bother to look at the casualties of the other members of the Eagle party. Fuck, this won't do. Everyone cover me! Brother Yu suddenly shouted, causing everyone to be stunned. In terms of actual combat, Brother Yu was probably the weakest here. Could it be that Brother Yu was still hiding some big move? They didn't have much time to think. Unscathed in battle and Southern Azure Sword crossed each other and hit Brother Yu behind them. It seemed like he was afraid of being interrupted, so he asked for everyone's cover. Brother Yu could no longer be attacked. Eternal had also heard Brother Yu's shout and was very anxious. He hurriedly ordered people to come forward and destroy the skill. For a moment, Brother Yu became the focus of the battlefield. Even the Han family young master couldn't help but ask, "How long do you need?" Brother Yu quickly took out a teleportation scroll from his pocket. A teleportation circle instantly appeared. Before Brother Yu disappeared, he said, "I'll go get Qianli." Everyone coughed up blood. After all this time, Brother Yu's big move was actually a summoning skill. When Brother Yu teleported away, he was already at the resurrection point. He was glad that he had the resurrection scroll. Otherwise, if Qianli forced him to go offline, it would be quite scary. He went offline and immediately dialed a number. The other side picked up quickly. Brother Yu was anxious. Before the other side could speak, he had already said, "Come quickly, there's an expert. An expert like you can't hold on any longer." "I'm coming." After saying that, the phone was hung up with a beep. Brother Yu was a little confused. Gu Fei's decisiveness made him a little dazed. He hurriedly looked through the call records and confirmed that it was Gu Fei. Only then did he relax. After thinking for a while, to be more secure, Brother Yu dialed another number. "Hello, Brother Yu, what's up?" "What's up, little bai?" Brother Yu's call was to 100 Generations of Classics. "I'm free. If you're free, come and help us fight. We've met an expert. He's like you, a professional." Brother Yu said, "Really? I can't come. Boss told me not to go online for now." Did he call Qianli? 100 Generations of Classics was a model employee and listened to his leader the most. "He did, but I'm afraid Don't be afraid. He's already the strongest in the circle. There's not much controversy. By the way, who did you guys meet? Do you know his name?" 100 Generations of Classics said. "He said he's Chen Qi. It sounds like his real name, but in the game, Chen Qi?" 100 Generations of Classics mumbled. "You know him?" "I don't know him, but if his surname is Qin, what's wrong with his surname? Gu Qi, Liang Qin, and Qin are the 4 great families in our martial arts circle. If his surname is really Qin, then he'll most likely be from this Qin family. Then they might not fight. The four great families move around frequently, so it's impossible that they don't know each other. They won't fight just because they know each other? Didn't you also know him at that time? Didn't you still beat him up? Brother Yu was very doubtful. Hey, I'm different from them. The four great families have a close relationship with each other, so they often marry each other by marriage. This way, they're considered a family, and they have to respect each other's seniority. In terms of seniority, that Gu Fei is incredible. Did you know? From the perspective of a master's teachings, he and his father are of the same generation. At most, his father is his senior brother. Of course, because of the special relationship of blood relations, it's not good to say that, so it's vague. But don't worry. Apart from this higher level of relationship, Gu Fei isn't low either. By the way, how old is that Chin brat? That masked assassin? I didn't see him. But if he's playing online, I don't think he's too old. He's about the same age as us, right? Brother, you said. Then hurry up and return to the game. You're going to miss a good show. Fuck. Brother Yu quickly hung up and was about to return to the game, but this call with Bai Jingluan had already wasted a lot of time. In the game, Brother Yu logged off and Gu Fei logged on almost immediately. When everyone received the system notification that their friend had logged on, they all felt that Brother Yu's summoning skills were at the peak of perfection. What's the situation? Gu Fei sent a message in the group as soon as he logged on. Coordinates XXX, hurry up. Han family young master typed the coordinates. What's his background? Gu Fei asked. From the studio. Why didn't you tell me that there's a fight? Gu Fei was very dissatisfied. Originally, we didn't need you. This battle doesn't rely on strength, but on connections. But now there's a bit of an accident. Han family young master said. The other members of the mercenary group were extremely impressed. The battle was so intense that they barely glanced at the messages, but this guy actually still had the time to say one sentence after another. I'll be there soon. Gu Fei was obviously not a talkative person. What's the situation here? Saying it would hurt Brother Yu's pride, because without him, the situation wouldn't be affected at all. They were still holding on the same way they were before, but under such a situation, the clerics were consuming a lot of energy. The moment the clerics ran out of mana would be the moment they couldn't hold on any longer. At this moment, the strength of Han family young master, a legendary cleric with the golden ratio, was displayed. Firstly, his recovery was stronger than normal clerics, and secondly, he had more mana than normal clerics, so his endurance was also stronger. As for normal clerics, they would add more HP to ensure their survivability, but this guy didn't hesitate to command this and that to ensure that he wouldn't be attacked. Dao Xiangmu and Lin Sensen, who were envious of Han family young master's strength, couldn't help but shrink back when they saw this. They didn't have the confidence and courage to point fingers at such an expert team. Another important reason why they were able to hold on was that Yun Xiang had led a dozen people into the streets. He didn't want to wipe out the enemies after receiving Han family young master's orders, but to harass and distract the Eagle group. This infuriated Everlasting. He could see through the enemy's plan, which was to stall for time. When Brother Yu teleported away, he also knew that he was going offline to get drunk with Qianli. However, even though he could read the situation, he couldn't think of a way to solve it. They couldn't ignore the attacks of the dozen people, but if they fought back, they would retreat. Eternal couldn't lead them away from the battlefield. Go and wipe them out. They obviously needed time. Very overpowered players weren't experts, but their equipment was pretty good. Why were their equipment not bad? They were rich. Last time, they had extorted tens of thousands from everyone. Gu Fei and the others didn't care about tens of thousands, but to the players, tens of thousands was a huge sum of money, a huge sum of money. With such a huge sum of money, who wouldn't equip themselves? So, even though very overpowered players didn't have that fancy equipment, they were shamelessly attacking and retreating. Eternal couldn't do anything about it. After a few rounds, they only managed to kill 4 of them. Chen Qi was an expert. His individual strength was outstanding, but he didn't have the in-game sense of teamwork. He just continued to attack. Even though he was able to beat up very overpowered players, what was the point of not dying? This battle was forcefully stalling for time. However, there was a point in stalling for time. They had experts to back them up, so they had more support. What about Eternal? What did they have? The other half of Eagle Group was still alive, but Eternal had already received news that the other half had been surrounded and were fighting for their lives. Apparently, the odds were against them, and they had no hope of escaping. Eternal glanced at the Han family young master gloomily. This battle had been ruined by him. He originally thought that with the help of an expert like Qin-Chi, they would be able to easily wipe out very overpowered players. However, this guy was just too overpowered. He was able to single-handedly support the entire team, and he even had the time to command a bunch of trash players to split their firepower. Eternal only had one hope, which was that Han family young master's mana would quickly run out. However, he was an old acquaintance of Han family young master and knew his style of playing as a cleric. If all the clerics in the game were to compare endurance, this person would definitely be the best. This was the golden ratio of clerics. Only when their mana and mana reached a balance would they have the best endurance. Having more mana didn't mean that you could last longer. The more mana you had, the weaker your mana regeneration. If someone used one recovery spell, you would have to use 3, and in the end, your mana would be used up first. Brother Qin, is there any way to take down that cleric? Eternal was at his wit's end against Han family young master. His attacks could be seen through. All he could think of was to command everyone to protect the cleric and stall for time. Oh, which one? Qin-Chi replied. Eternal was startled and pointed in that direction. That one. Oh, let me see. Qin-Chi said. Eternal was going crazy. He thought that Qin-Chi was at his wit's end against the clerics. He wanted to talk to Qin-Chi to see if there was a way for them to work together. However, Qin-Chi didn't seem to have considered this problem. Could it be that this guy didn't realize that the key to winning this battle was whether or not the cleric's HP and mana could be depleted before the enemy's reinforcements arrived? If he didn't even have this little bit of judgment, how could he be an expert? If it were anyone else, Eternal would have shouted at them. However, he could only patiently teach this expert a lesson. Look, they're in a passive position right now. They're basically relying on the cleric's healing to sustain them. Once the cleric is down, they'll collapse as well. That's right. Oh, that's what you mean. There's actually no need. The cleric's mana will be depleted eventually. They won't be able to last much longer. Qin-Chi said. But the problem is that their reinforcements are about to arrive. Eternal said. Then we'll take down the reinforcements as well. Eternal was speechless. What else could he say in the face of such a confident expert? It wasn't that he doubted Qin-Chi's strength, but he didn't think that Qin-Chi was strong enough to take down Qianli in one hit. If the two of them fought, what about the Eagle Group? They would be pincered by the extremely powerful expert group and the equipment group. Wouldn't they all be finished? When the time came, a bunch of people would help Qianli attack him. Would he be able to survive? Eternal was afraid that Qin-Chi wouldn't listen to him, so he changed his approach. Boss, you're not afraid of experts, but we won't be able to hold them off. It's already too late. Qin-Chi suddenly said. What? I can feel it. It's already here. It really is an expert. Qin-Chi suddenly looked up. A black figure had already flown out from the rooftop. He shouted, I'm coming. His fiery sword was already slashing down towards Qin-Chi. Gu Fei didn't need to ask to know who the expert was. This was a true expert. His aura was far stronger than a normal person's. Gu Fei could feel him even in a crowd. Chapter 959. Gu Fei's entrance was very eye-catching. This feeling of being the center of attention and anticipation made many of the OP experts extremely envious. In fact, it wasn't just them. Even the members of the Eagle Group wanted to be this bold and unrestrained. However, this wasn't the time to be envious. As soon as Gu Fei said, I'm coming, and his sword descended, their hearts immediately sank to their feet. Qin-Chi, however, did not panic. He had long been aware of the incoming sword's momentum. He only hesitated for a moment before he swung his dagger to meet the attack. From the perspective of the bystanders, Gu Fei's attack seemed to be coming from a higher position. Even if his opponent met the attack head-on, he would still have the upper hand. However, from Gu Fei's professional eyes, he could see that his opponent had already prepared for all of Eternal's possible attacks. This attack would definitely be blocked by his opponent's dagger no matter what. As such, Gu Fei used a technique that was impossible in martial arts: teleportation. As soon as his figure disappeared, Eternal panicked. He didn't even see where Gu Fei had teleported to before he yelled, "Be careful!" However, Chen Qi's reaction was much faster than his warning. He didn't even turn his head as he stabbed his dagger behind him. In the end, with a ding sound, his unexpected attack was blocked by Gu Fei, who had flashed behind him. Gu Fei pushed the Night Streak sword diagonally, blocking the dagger that was stabbing towards him. Gu Fei hurriedly retreated a few steps. "Oh, you really are an expert." Gu Fei was pleasantly surprised. Chen Qi didn't reply. He suddenly swung his left hand, and something flew out. Gu Fei blocked it with his sword, and it was knocked to the side. Everyone hurriedly looked over. A strange-looking object had fallen to the ground. Yutian Shenming ran over and picked it up. He looked left and right with a confused expression on his face. That thing was just a piece of scrap metal. It wasn't anything at all. In this short amount of time, Gu Fei and Chen Qi were already fighting. As soon as Gu Fei arrived, the situation naturally changed. Didn't he see that Yutian Shenming had the time to run over to pick up the items? Eternal and the others complained bitterly. At this time, they were being pincered by a team of overpowered experts and a team of commoners. It was their cleric's turn to struggle. But how could their priests be as good as the Han family young master? Not long after, their team was surrounded by danger. At this moment, Forever was only hoping that Chen Qi was the #1 expert in the universe and could instantly eliminate Chenli. But when he looked over, the two of them were fighting intensely. His position was constantly changing, and he was constantly brandishing his weapon. Even his left hand, which was not holding a weapon, was never idle. From time to time, he would even use his leg to assist. This was a magnificent scene that would never appear in PvP. Everyone only knew that this was a battle between experts, but they couldn't see anything special about it. All they could see was a blur. Although the two were still using their fists and feet, weapons were still their main attacks. It was a game, and unless there were some special skills, they would still rely on their weapons to deal damage. As a result, the sword and dagger in the two's hands were one long and one short, one dark and one bright. Their movements were so dazzling that the people who tried to observe them couldn't help but tear up. Too fast. It was simply too fast. Everyone present was an expert, and they had a deep understanding of the game. But these two people's movements were so fast that they felt like this was beyond the stats that their characters should have. Only Sword Demon, who had received some guidance from Gu Fei, could understand a little. This was rhythm. Since both of them were experts and professionals, they were able to change their rhythm even faster. Most of the time, they would only use half or even a third of a move. As soon as they saw that the opponent had reacted, they would immediately change their moves. How could they not be fast when attacking in such a way that saved time? Sword Demon used his own understanding to explain to everyone why they were so ridiculously fast. In the end, someone asked, "Then who has the advantage right now?" Sword Demon felt very awkward because he couldn't see it at all. He could only occasionally catch a few details, and then he realized that the reasoning behind it was something that Gu Fei had told him before. After he carefully studied it, he didn't know how many rounds they had fought. "I feel like they haven't hit each other yet." Unscathed in battle concluded after watching for a long time. "If this goes on, won't we be finished first?" Southern Azure Sword said as he pulled out an arrow that had hit his shoulder. Right now, they weren't even trying to dodge their attacks. It was clear just how big of an advantage they had. The Eagle group had already lost 2 people. At this moment, Brother Yu finally returned to the game. Everyone was confused. Why was the one who was called faster than the one who was called first? Brother Yu immediately sent a message in the chat. "What's going on?" "They're still fighting." "Who's fighting?" Besides you, everyone else is fighting. What about Qianli and that Qinqi? They're fighting like a flower. Brother Yu was confused. Didn't they say that they wouldn't fight? He didn't say anything else and hurriedly rushed back. How are you guys doing? Do you need my help? At this moment, Gu Fei suddenly shouted. When everyone heard this, their previous worries disappeared. They couldn't see through the intricacies of this battle. All they could see was that Qin Qi's thief character was faster than Gu Fei's, so they were worried about Gu Fei. But now, he actually had the time to say that he wanted to help them. Did that mean that he had the upper hand? He didn't just have the upper hand. Without Qin Qi's help, the Eagle group led by Yong Yong would be surrounded and bullied. Take care of yourself. The experts all shouted at Gu Fei. Gu Fei smiled and turned to face his opponent. If you don't show your real skills, I won't let you go. What are you doing? Snickers, do you even know how to play? Everyone was in an uproar. They thought that Qin Qi's sharp dagger was just a trick. Everyone was at a loss. They didn't know if Gu Fei was just bluffing to scare his opponent, or if he was playing psychological warfare. But based on their understanding of Gu Fei, he didn't like to use psychological tactics in fights. He always fought until the opponent collapsed. Everyone looked at Qin Qi, who was being criticized for blindly playing. Because he was masked, no one could see his expression after being criticized. They just realized that his attacks had suddenly slowed down. That's right, it was slow. Compared to his previous storm-like attacks, his current movements were so slow that it was laughable. When the extremely heaven-defying people saw this sudden change, someone suddenly shouted, "Is this Taiji Fist?" After this shout, a bunch of people nodded their heads and said yes. Taiji Fist was so common that it was seen through by this group of online gaming otakus. However, at this moment, Gu Fei's expression was much more solemn than before. Clearly, he was really focused at this moment. He said, "No wonder. So you practice Tai Chi. I was wondering why your movements were so messy and disorderly. If you practice boxing, just focus on your own. Why are you playing yang boxing? Is that something you can play with?" Those who were more observant noticed that Qin Qi's masked face twitched a few times. They guessed that he was about to collapse from anger at Gu Fei. However, he didn't say anything. With a wave of his hand, he got into a fighting stance towards Gu Fei. In the end, Gu Fei strode towards very defiant and shouted, "How are you? Are you all still alive?" Hey. Everyone was shocked. The enemy was still in front of them. What was wrong with this person? Why was he walking towards them so casually? Could it be that the guy had been killed instantly? Was it just because of the delay in the white light? Is he dead? I don't think so. Did he make a move? I didn't see him. That's too fast. That's right. Then why is he still standing? He's not dead yet? Hey, he's still moving. He blinked. Hey, he's not dead yet. What are you doing? Everyone shouted at Gu Fei. No matter how messed up Qin Qi's story was, they knew one thing for sure. Qin Qi was someone they couldn't deal with. Even if they were a whole team, even if the other party was using his random tricks. Tai Chi Fist is about stopping the opponent with stillness and moving according to the person. So we pay attention to listening skills. We have to judge the opponent's momentum before we react. Look, he's listening skills now. If I don't move, he'll become stupid. Gu Fei said, "You're exaggerating." Everyone didn't believe it. Although what Gu Fei said sounded like something that Tai Chi Fist was particular about, if this fist technique was really so rigid that the enemy didn't move, then there was no way to attack. Who would believe it? Sure enough, when Qin Qi saw that the enemy wasn't moving, he could only move. So, he had to take the initiative to attack. He raised his dagger and swung it towards Gu Fei. Gu Fei didn't hesitate either. He turned around and met the attack with his sword. Qin Qi saw that this was exactly what he wanted. He swung his dagger, but the sword had already deviated from its original course. Just as he was about to step forward and attack, suddenly a cluster of flames streaked across the sword. Qin Qi wasn't stabbed by the sword, but was instead burned by the flames. Shocked, he took a step back and saw Gu Fei smiling at him. "You can't do it." Gu Fei said, It would be fine if you practiced anything else, but you just had to practice Tai Chi, Gu Fei said as he shook his head. The very heaven-defying people were extremely anxious. They all ran over and asked, "What can I do? What can I do?" They weren't worried about the Eagle group at all. Half of them had already fallen. They were now filled with curiosity about the battle between Gu Fei and this expert. Tai Chi Fist is about leading and combining. Just like what happened just now, I didn't move and he made his move. This is called leading. He used a move to lure me into making a move. Then he used his listening skills to determine the strength and direction of my move. He followed the momentum and changed the path. His skill is quite good. Unfortunately, he met me. It's useless. But everyone hurriedly asked. Because I don't need to use my strength to attack. I use. As Gu Fei said this, a ball of fire jumped up from his fingertips. Magic! Gu Fei said. Chapter 960. Everyone stared blankly at the flame on Gu Fei's fingertip for a long time before looking at Qin with sympathy. The great master that everyone was helpless against turned out to be just a piece of trash, huh? From Gu Fei's tone, it was as if he didn't even need to lift a finger. Qin was also speechless. Gu Fei wasn't just saying it, he had already dealt him a blow. Even the gamers understood this logic, so how could a professional like him not understand? If you have the ability, then don't do this. Let's compete in real martial arts. Qin suddenly said with a hoarse voice. Everyone's eyes turned to look at Gu Fei. How would this guy respond? He would most likely agree, right? Thinking of this, everyone hurriedly attacked Eagle Group. This way, Gu Fei's victory wouldn't affect the overall situation. Everyone in Eagle Group had tears streaming down their faces. They knew that they were going to die no matter what. Who would have thought that Gu Fei would chuckle and say, "If you want to compete in real martial arts, then we can do it another day. If you want to cause trouble right now, then I'll have to chop you to death first." You don't dare? Qin asked. What are you talking about? Don't think that I won't recognize you just because you're wearing a mask, Chen. Gu Fei said. Qin was clearly shocked when he heard this. He turned around and ran. Gu Fei wasn't in a hurry to chase after him. He quickly asked in the chat, "Do you know what this guy's name is?" Everyone felt like fainting. Didn't you know even with a mask? No, Mayas. Gu Fei said. Qin. Someone already told Gu Fei. Nonsense, Qin is only 3. Gu Fei said. It really is that name. Everyone shouted. I'll go chase after him. That's fine with you guys, right? Gu Fei said. No problem, no problem. Do what you do. Everyone hurriedly said. They could tell that this person had some sort of relationship with Gu Fei. Seeing that his identity was about to be exposed, he actually turned around and ran. Only then did Gu Fei catch up, but he was already lagging far behind. But when he saw Qin rush out of the street and turn around, Gu Fei immediately teleported up to the roof. This was his advantage. He could judge the opponent's direction and take the shortest straight line between the 2 points. Seeing Qin abandon them and run, Eternal almost cursed out loud. Such a great expert actually didn't even have this bit of loyalty and left without even saying goodbye. What a bear! The situation was dire. Eternal and the others didn't even have the chance to use teleportation scrolls. In just a short while, 2 more people were killed. Eternal and his 4 brothers were surrounded in a corner. He knew that it wasn't that his opponent didn't have a chance to kill him. It was just that his opponent had deliberately ordered him to stay until the end. Sure enough, the other 4 beside him were killed one by one. Someone from the other side immediately shouted for them to stop. Their attacks paused for a moment, but all of their weapons were ready to fire. As long as he made the slightest movement, they would instantly kill him. Are you registered? The Han family young master walked out of the array and asked leisurely. Eternal gritted his teeth and didn't speak. Does he have any PK points? The Han family young master asked the person beside him. Who knows? You'll have to ask Qinli. Qinli probably doesn't have time right now. I wonder who that Qin is. Brother, you didn't tell him who he was when you went offline? Brother Yu, why did you go offline for so long? Brother Yu, why aren't you back yet? At this moment, Eternal was quite sad. He was the center of the crowd, but he still wasn't the center of the conversation. He had just spoken to him, and the topic had already changed. Someone had already asked Brother Yu in the channel. Everyone was curious about the relationship between Gu Fei and Qin Qi. They felt that Brother Yu might know something. Brother Yu was rushing over. Without agility, he obviously wasn't as fast as Gu Fei. Seeing someone ask a question, it wasn't Brother Yu's style to not explain. He hurriedly ran over and started gossiping about the Gu, Qi, Liang and Qin families. Everyone was stunned. In the end, Brother Yu also asked with concern, "How is it? It seems like the seniority you were talking about is true." That guy realized that Qianli might recognize him and ran away. Someone said, "Fuck, he ran away. Doesn't that mean I won't be able to see anything?" Brother Yu was depressed. "There's still Eternal here. Should we wait for you to come back before we start?" "Alright, wait for me." Since he couldn't go higher, he would go lower. "Wait a moment, everyone isn't here yet." Someone actually said to Eternal. Eternal was furious. "Let's do it quickly, what's the point of wasting time?" Everyone ignored him. In a fit of anger, Eternal suddenly raised his sword to cut his own throat. The damage was done, but with a flash of white light, his life was restored. Han family young master had a look of disdain. "With me here, it's up to me if you want to die, no matter who it is." Everyone looked sympathetically at Yongyuan, who was surrounded. Eternal was just short of vomiting blood. He couldn't even die. Was there any justice in this world? However, Eternal was indeed a veteran online player. He had a strong mental fortitude and didn't get forced offline by the system due to health problems. Since there was nothing he could do, Eternal sat on the ground and took out a book from his pocket. Jianan Yu's eyes were wet. This scene was so familiar. "Brother, I was also forced into a situation like this in the past." The players didn't say anything. In fact, Eternal grudge was more personal. He had a history with the Sword Phantom, young Master Han. Yun Zhongmu had been tortured by the Eagle Group in Moonlit Night City. As for the others, they weren't really interested in torturing the leader of the group. They just wanted to watch the show. He was always reading, but anyone could tell that he was actually feeling restless, because after he pretended to turn the pages frequently in the beginning, he slowly turned the pages slower and slower. In the end, he simply stopped and stared blankly. It was obvious that he was thinking about something. After a while, he raised his head and looked around the crowd. Finally, his gaze landed on Sword Demon. "I'm sorry for what happened back then, Boss Sword Demon." "I admit that," Eternal suddenly said. The chatter around them suddenly quietened down. "It's not me, it's the entire gang," Sword Demon said. "The gang is just a fleeting cloud." Eternal smiled. No one feels a sense of belonging to this group. It's all because of the influence and cohesiveness of the core members around them. If the core members are good, the gang will be good. If the core members have great influence and cohesiveness, the gang will be able to grow. In this aspect, Boss Sword Demon is a talent. Boss Yun Zhongmu is also not bad. Influence and cohesiveness are both indispensable. For example, one of you has great influence, but your cohesiveness is basically 0. "Oh no, it's a negative number," Eternal said. Everyone looked towards Han family young master. The negative number that Eternal was talking about was obviously him. But this time, Han family young master actually just listened quietly and didn't immediately start his taunting. "As for your current situation, honestly speaking, the core member isn't you, Sword Demon, but Qianli Drunk. His strength is so strong that it's ridiculous. I've never seen anyone who can forcefully create influence and cohesiveness through this method in so many years." Eternal said. "What do you mean? Is he trying to sow discord with you?" Yutian Shenming jumped out. "Ha, little kid, don't speak nonsense if you don't understand. I'm talking about your guild's problems." Eternal said. Yutian Shenming was furious. He shot an arrow over. Eternal didn't dodge it. He casually pulled the arrow out. "You don't need to worry about our guild's matters." Sword Demon said. "Ah, oh Sword Demon, you're a good person. I know you know that. A guild with 1,000 miles drunk as the core was very dangerous. If he were to leave one day, his influence and cohesiveness would be irreplaceable. Even if he doesn't leave, it will still be dangerous. The size of the guild will continue to grow and the cohesiveness it needs will also increase. But as the players' levels increase, Qianli Drunk's battle strength will continuously decrease. I think you guys know his characteristics better than me. When that time comes, he won't be able to protect the guild. Bullshit. Yutian Shunming jumped up again, but this time he didn't shoot an arrow. I'm just giving you a piece of advice. Right now, it's very overpowered. The scale is still small and it's easy to do it. If you continue to grow, you won't be able to change even if you want to. Eternal said. Then let him be. Sword Demon said indifferently. As expected of Boss Sword Demon. Only you can make me feel guilty about what I've done. If it was anyone else, I wouldn't hesitate to do it again. Eternal said. Why did you do that? Sword Demon asked. Nothing much. It's just that I've always felt that working with a studio is the most efficient way to strengthen myself. Eternal said. You call that working together? Han Family Young Master, who hadn't spoken yet, finally spoke. The moment he opened his mouth, he laughed coldly. The moment he opened his mouth, he pulled on Eternal's tail. Eternal felt a wave of annoyance. Indeed, working together? That was just a way to deceive oneself. It couldn't be denied that because he was close to the studio, he was able to easily obtain top-quality items that others might not even be able to obtain even if they died. He was able to easily enjoy the joy of being a top expert. However, were the sacrifices he made because of this really something he was willing to do? You only care about the results. Do you know how to enjoy the process? You only know how to curry favor and don't know how to struggle. You're still teaching us how to run a guild. Tiske, there are so many experts here. What haven't they seen before? Do we need you to teach us that? The collapse of a guild is also a part of our journey in the game. The game has always been played over and over again. It's only interesting if we play it differently. An idiot like you wouldn't understand either. What a waste of my saliva. Where's Brother Yu? Why isn't he here yet? I can't wait any longer. I'm going to vomit if I keep looking at such an idiot. I'm coming, I'm coming. I'm coming. Brother Yu's voice rang out on the street. Do it. Han Family Young Master waved his hand. Let me do it, let me do it. A bunch of people rushed over. They all wanted to step on him, punch him, or smack him with a brick. Eternal instantly turned into white light just like that. Brother Yu, who was far away, saw the white light and stopped running in a daze. He muttered to himself, I'm here, but I haven't reached him yet. Chapter 961. Brother Yu was quite depressed. He had been busy running back and forth online and offline, yet he didn't get to see any good show. How could the gossipy Brother Yu endure this? When he arrived, Eternal was already dead. When he asked about Qianli, he was already long gone. Brother Yu looked at his two short legs and could only sigh. Eternal's emotions were very complicated. After reviving, he stayed in the revival point for a long time. He wasn't afraid of being ambushed or being hunted down. It was just that the conversation with Unbelievable made him feel very uncomfortable. He thought that he could face everything calmly, but in the end, he realized that even he despised his own actions in the depths of his heart. How could he endure this? He stood in a daze at the resurrection point and began to reminisce about his gaming life. He stood there in a daze for a long time. He was a veteran gamer, and his gaming life was very long. On the side of Cloud City, the major guild's attacks had extraordinary results. Relatively speaking, Unbelievable's battle was the most suspenseful and tense, but the losses were the least. This was completely determined by the way they fought. The other guilds fought against a sea of players. Although there was no suspense in their annihilation of such elite equipment experts, it was still a battle of lives. In the end, those who survived and picked up one or two pieces of equipment were naturally lucky. As for how these pieces of equipment were to be used, that was up to the guilds themselves. It was inevitable that many grudges would arise. However, at the very least, In terms of attacking the workshops, the quest had been successfully completed. The bosses of the studios all had ashen faces. At this moment, the two puppet armies that each of them sent out were completely annihilated. Not a single one of them returned alive. The dropped equipment was still bearable for these rich bosses, but this meant that their plans had been completely ruined. What should they do next? Everyone looked at Unparalleled Genius in a daze. Unparalleled Genius's expression also changed a few times. When he first heard that the Cloud City players were attacking, he thought that it was an opportunity to stir up trouble. But later on, the scouts reported that the Cloud City players were simply targeting the puppet armies of their studios. The real players of the 26 guilds were still stationed near the clock tower and did not make any movements. The two parties that they had wanted to provoke a dispute actually did not have any direct conflict. At that time, Matchless Ing did not care about this because the Eagle group led by Eternal had encountered very defiant. He felt that this was an opportunity because he had a secret expert like Qin-Chi on his side. As such, he hurriedly sent Qin-Chi over, wanting to use this opportunity to destroy very defiant. In the end, Unparalleled Wonder received news that Party Forever had been wiped out, and Qin-Chi had fled after fighting Qianli for a while. Furthermore, according to the Eagle Group subordinates, this Qin-Chi seemed to have some sort of connection with Qianli. Unparalleled Wonder could not help but feel depressed. Qin-Chi was the trump card in his hands, the trump card to restrict the various gaming studios, the trump card to wipe out the OP, and the trump card to suppress Qianli in a duel. Yet he was so weak. Matchless Wonder was disappointed. He sent a message to Qin-Chi to ask about the situation, but he had yet to receive a reply. Qin-Chi was running all the way and did not have the time to look at any messages. If he were to compete with Gu Fei in pure kung fu, he would not have run away so quickly. However, Gu Fei's meaning was clear. You can have pure kung fu, but not now. Everyone has their own teams. If you want to cause trouble, then I'll kill you with magic. Magic? Qin-Chi wanted to vomit blood at the thought of this. This thing that did not exist in real life was the perfect counter to Tai Chi Kung Fu that he was proficient in. If it was any other Kung Fu, it would be enough to deal with normal players, but in front of a professional like Gu Fei, it was indeed a waste of time. There was a famous saying in martial arts, boxing is easy, but it is hard to change. Tai Chi Kung Fu was even more difficult to achieve after 3 years of practice. Qin-Chi specialized in Tai Chi. The other martial arts were really just for show and could not be used in public. For internal martial arts and external martial arts, those who could practice both internal and external martial arts were martial arts geniuses. There was only one such person in the world, and that was the opponent in front of Qin-Chi. To be honest, even if Qin-Chi used Tai Chi push hands against Gu Fei, he was not confident that he would be able to push him. Moreover, that guy was using magic, but then again, if he was not a match for him, Qin-Chi would not have run away without saying a word. He really had something that was difficult to say. He would explain it later. Qin-Chi thought like this as he ran without stopping. He did not know how many laps he had gone, but he did not see Gu Fei appear behind him all the way. At this time, he ran to a deserted place. Qin-Chi finally stopped and prepared to take a breather. He still had messages flashing on his side. Grandson. Just as he supported himself against the wall, he heard someone call him. Qin-Chi had already felt that there was someone there. He already knew who it was from the way the person called him. He supported himself against the wall and coughed twice. He turned his head and saw that it was Gu Fei. Who are you calling? Qin-Chi said. Aren't you Qin-Chi? Come and greet your fourth uncle. Gu Fei said. Qin-Chi said, you, for a long time, but he still did not dare to say, your uncle. This well-educated person would not lose his composure no matter what environment he was in, even in a game. Now that he had caught up, Qin-Chi knew that it was not good to run anymore. He took the initiative to greet him. Forget it. Gu Fei waved his hand. Qin-Chi did not greet him, but he still had to greet him. In the end, he pulled down his mask and said, Fourth uncle, how are you? Say, how could this stop Qin-Chi from running away? At that time, he and Qianli met face to face. When he saw that the person who flew down from the roof was Gu Fei, he cursed in his heart. If he knew that Qianli was actually Gu Fei, he would have thought of a way to avoid this matter. In the end, he had already met him, so he could only accept the challenge. However, he did not dare say a single word, afraid that his identity would be seen through. If his identity was not seen through, he could pretend to be ignorant. If he was seen through, he would have no choice but to go up and greet him. If this person was not polite, wouldn't he have to kneel? In fact, they would usually be polite to each other. Although seniority couldn't be messed up, they were still of the same age. If they could avoid it, they would avoid awkwardness. But in a hostile situation, Chen Qi was very worried that Gu Fei would deliberately not be polite and act like an elder. When the two armies faced off in front of everyone's eyes, the other side's general would directly kneel before he could fight. Directly kneel. Directly kneel. In this situation, anyone would have to run. Now that there was no one watching, it was fine to kneel. But in the end, wasn't Gu Fei being polite out of habit? At this time, Chen Qi was still thinking. If his identity was exposed in that situation, would this guy be polite or pretend to be ignorant? Gu Fei looked at the person in front of him and laughed. Is your son doing well? Quite good. He's alive and kicking, said Chen Qi. You're really good. You used your son's name as a sock puppet in the game? Heh. Chen Qi smiled foolishly. His face was full of the happiness and intoxication of being a father. This guy's real name was Chen Zizheng. His seniority was 1 generation lower than Gu Fei's, but they were about the same age. Moreover, he was already married. His son was now 3 years old. His son's name was Chen Qi. What are you doing with the studio? Asked Gu Fei. Nothing much. Chen Zizhang explained briefly, and Gu Fei understood. These were all things that he had the opportunity to experience. What Bai Jingluan was experiencing now was that he was invited by the studio to practice the efficiency leveling method. When Chen Zizhang saw that there was a chance to earn milk powder money, he didn't pay much attention to it and accepted it. To be honest, there wasn't much to be concerned about. Although Gu Fei didn't like Ying Qi Studio, he was also a legal businessman. He didn't steal or rob. He just had more tricks up his sleeves. However, it seemed that after the previous failed cooperation with Gu Fei, he didn't play any tricks this time. He treated Chen Qi quite well. The Chen family was also an aristocratic family. Although it wasn't as big as the Gu family, it wasn't as poor as Bai Jingluan's small family. However, practicing martial arts was a very expensive activity. Chen Zizhang intended to train his son, Chen Qi, so Chen Qi's milk powder money wouldn't be ordinary milk powder money. Therefore, when he found out that there was a chance to earn money in this game, Chen Zizhang didn't hold back. What do we do now? Should I call you Little Qi or Zizhang? Asked Gu Fei. Just call me Zizhang. Chen Qi hurriedly said. Using the name Chen Qi wasn't a big deal to others, but to Gu Fei, it was like calling him a grandson. It was already depressing enough that he was 1 generation younger than his peers. Now that he was 2 generations younger, it was even more depressing. Chen Qi regretted it now. If he knew that he would meet this hero in the game, he wouldn't have used his son's name as a sock puppet. The boss is calling me. I have to hurry back. Chen Zizhang saw the message. Unparalleled wonder was asking him. What do you say when you get back? Asked Gu Fei. What else can I say? I met a relative, and an elder at that. I can't do anything. Chen Zizhang said gloomily. Even if I fight, I can't. I think you should emphasize this point. Said Gu Fei. Alright, go. If you fight with the studio again, I'll kill you with magic. I'll let it go this time, since you used the name Little Qi. Said Gu Fei. Thank you, elder. Chen Zizhang said with a smile. Actually, they were of the same generation and they were young, so they didn't care too much about seniority. Chen Zizhang's elder wasn't a respectful title, it was a form of ridicule towards Gu Fei. Being an elder among his peers wasn't necessarily something to be proud of. For example, when they had a meal together, Chen Zizhang and the others would usually sit at the table with the younger ones. As for Gu Fei, his table was often filled with white-bearded old men. Chen Zizhang would rather not have this kind of glory. You're tuning in to the Passion Page's YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.